Right? 10% rule.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Casper City Council work session. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd. We will begin with meeting follow-up, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not aware that I have anything for this portion of the agenda.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything from last week that needs addressed in any way? Sir?
It isn't specifically about the meeting, but I want to congratulate you and the man sitting up in this left-hand corner for the landfill fire. I think they deserve a big round of credit. So I want to let them know that, and he's ignoring me.
Did you call them a?
Chief Black, you were addressed as the man in the corner. You were given high praise for your work at the landfill.
Thank you. It wasn't me, it was my troops.
Well, I think I said you and your men. So,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
I hear better if you say Chief Black.
Okay,
I'm pretty deaf, so.
very.
You will no longer be referred to from Councilor Kathy as the man in the corner. All right, with
But I
that,
did specify the left as opposed to the right.
let's move on to downtown parking update from Republic Parking, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. We have the opportunity to hear from our parking garage operator. They hold an agreement with the city and as a matter of fact, in a year, we will have the opportunity to discuss continued relationship and how that could go. But tonight really is just an opportunity to get an update. Here's some vital information with regard to what their experiences are and those kinds of things. And of course, be available for any questions that you all might have tonight. So without further ado, if I could turn the time over to Liz and her team, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Ms. Becker? If you please.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. You can hear this, right?
Yes, ma'am.
We are. Okay, sorry.
Get up in it.
We have been working with Republic Parking since 2020. I'm pleased we've got John Mead, who has flown in from the Spokane area, Tacoma area today, and Laura Leertz, who has come up from Denver as part of the team, and they have met some of you previously, few of you, and then council transitioned, and so they want to give an update, a little bit of history too, but provide an update on what's going on at the parking garage and just parking in general with some statistics that I think you all will find interesting. So they put together a PowerPoint that they'll be sharing with you today. So John and Laura.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clicker's not working now. It was working.
Okay, well, thank you for coming.
So while they're working on that though, because I know you guys have got other important stuff to talk about. So as Liz mentioned, there was a competitive RFP process that was issued and we were awarded the contract. And if you guys have turned over on city council, so we wanted to give a little bit about us from historical perspective. Oh, thank you. So kind of what we wanted to cover today was a little bit about ourselves, Republic Parking, which we have our regional offices out of Denver, Colorado. Corporate is out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'll also go over some of the occupancy statistics for both the garage and the Center Street lot. Talk about our staffing, some of the outreach efforts that we've done along the way and what we'd like to continue to do in the future. Some of the parking trends that we've seen, and this includes looking at what town of Jackson, Wyoming is doing, what Cheyenne is doing, as well as Fort Collins and Greeley. So kind of in this regional area. And then also looking at what goals we've accomplished throughout the contract so far, and then what we can recommend moving forward, just as what we've seen kind of post-COVID as cities kind of recover from that as well. So our first one is, as we mentioned, we're with Republic Parking, but we're actually with a brand of a global network. So we've got different parking brands based on the region. So as I mentioned, Republic Parking is based here in more of the Northwest, where Impark is more of our Canadian subsidiary, as well as we've got other ones, Lanier and AmeriPark, which are more California, as well as the Southeast. And each one of those have a particular, I'm going to say, focus on parking and mobility. From a public standpoint, it's garage maintenance and upkeep as well as enforcement. Our Lanier brand is more healthcare oriented. Impark is more maintenance, technology, meters, that type of thing as well. But putting all that all together, we get to gain best practices from across the country as well as Canada and in London. We have some parking locations there across the pond, as they call it, that we can learn about and see this technologies and make hybrid as well. One thing that we're pretty proud of is that we are an accredited parking organization with distinction. So that comes from the International Parking and Mobility Institute, which is a global association of parking nerds and cats. I'm one of them. I'm also CAP certified. So I have a certificate in parking. But with that, that meant that we follow some best practices along the way. And we also help cities such as like Casper get to an APO status if they're desired to, so that there's probably maybe 5% of North America of cities that are actually accredited. So it's a pretty hard thing to get to. Also, some of you might not know, but for parking geeks that are in the room, there's actually multiple state and regional associations that do just talk about parking. So that could be buses and shuttles, it can be airports, but Wyoming falls under what's called the PIPIS, that's the Pacific Intermountain one. And we have an annual conference. I sit on the board, I'm vice chair. John used to sit on the board as chair. But we do networking events that are also free that you can sign on via webinars as well. So we can leave some information with Liz. And if you guys ever, I guess, are bored for an hour, we offer these webinars that you can listen to and see what others are doing. But these are also the types of services we offer for Casper. They're one of our smaller groups that we have here. But certainly, you know, we do the monthly parking permits that we'll talk about. We also do procurement of equipment, which we've talked to Liz about in the past. We do remote monitoring, so after hours support as well. If somebody gets stuck in a garage or they have a question, they can call a number as well for that. We offer a different entities. We kind of offer it as an a la carte type offering. We do event management, so that's more of like, we used to do it for the Levi Stadium for San Francisco 49ers. We also do a lot in Orlando at the convention center and that type of stuff where we have to manage the influx and outflux of traffic. And then just one more thing, and then we'll get into the heart of it, which is your parking operation here at the city. But this is just our mission statement. I think everybody can agree that probably most people get stressed out about where they're going to park. Are they going to get a ticket? Are they going to get towed? Are they going to get booted? Is their car going to be there when they return? And it's not actually getting excited about going across the street to the fair that's occurring or to some movie event or some city hosted type of venue, right? And so what we want to do is want to change that. We want to make sure that the garages and the surface lots are safe and that they're inviting. And you'll see that through some of the stuff that we've done here. But we also want to make sure they're excited about where they're going and not worried about parking, right? We want to make sure that they enjoy their time and not worry about what parking is going to do to them and stress out. So let's now talk a little bit about the occupancy. So as I mentioned, right, and as Liz mentioned too, there was an RFP that was issued back in May of 2020. And at that time, I did come up during COVID. I met with Liz and I toured the facilities and then we submitted our response. In that time, we asked some of the questions, knowing that it was COVID, that occupancy rates are certainly going to be down. The data that was provided to us was an 80% occupancy rate. Looking back at those, we're having a feeling that it was not just the garage, even though we asked for the breakdown of both the lot and the garage, but we think that was a combo of both the Center Street lot as well as the garage. RFP was issued. We were awarded the contract. We came in September 1st of 2020. And at that point, the garage itself, when we were handed over all of the monthly permit holders and contacted them, we were really at 6.53% occupancy in that garage for monthly permit holders. So it was a drastic decrease through what we want. And that's, John can talk about that, where in the contract, there is that revenue share, and the city hasn't necessarily seen some of that money just because, again, the occupancy is lower. We also learned that there were some third-party arrangements made that were not disclosed, and we decided to honor those arrangements. Certainly, we didn't want to upset the apple cart, being that we're the new kid on the block, as per se, and so we kept those third-party monthly permit arrangements. The other thing that was not disclosed in the RFP was that there was no charge for parking in December for monthlies. That was free, so that was also not part of our calculations because that was not defined, and when we looked at websites, it didn't say that either. So going into that, that's why some of the revenues haven't met the target that we expected. So we are pretty proud to announce that right now the garage itself is at 53% occupancy for those monthlies. It's a little harder to estimate that for the transients, for the paid parkers, just because there's not truly a system in place there. For certain lots or certain spaces, we have a mobile payment program, but we do tour the garage frequently, check the license plates to see if there's a valid permit. If there's not, then we certainly will issue it a parking citation. And then we follow up for payment there. One thing we did notice is that the old Yellowstone District parking lot, which is the state provided over, opened in 2021. So we did see through that there were some parkers that did go relocate over to that. So there was a slight, not necessarily a true dip, but there was, we're not seeing as many parkers because they're going to the free lot, right? Why would you pay a couple blocks? And so that's where you'll see the map that we included there as well. And so that does also lend to some of the challenges as well, since those who might be transient and pay the fee after the 2 hours of free parking, they're probably now going to go to that old Yellowstone District parking lot. So we are looking, we've been talking to Liz, and we'll mention that kind of towards the end of what we'll make some recommendations as well. Thanks, John. Did you have anything on that?
I do not.
So next we're going to talk, here's more of a staffing, it's an org chart, just so everybody can kind of get an understanding of who's who, as well as what more of the corporate and remote support that's available to certainly the city of Casper. So you will see here where I'm listed there as the Vice President of Municipal Services. It's a dedicated division that we have here at Republic Parking and the other sister brands that we can offer to municipalities, given that there's regulations and policies and state statutes and all of that good stuff that you've got to follow as ordinances. And so I have that experience and can help navigate those kind of avenues. Harold, he's not here today. He is our territory vice president. So John reports over to him. I report directly up to the CEO. And then there's John here, and then we've got Rodney, who's based out of Salt Lake, and he works with Sharon, that's here located, and Tevin, that's located here in Casper. But we do have, you know, as you can see on the shared services, and we have lawyers available, risk management for liability, which John is going to talk about in a few slides, but also the equipment, which is another one of the security cameras that we provided some assistance with as well. But I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, right now we're operating with a single ambassador porter. I'm sure somebody's experienced employee poaching. Our supervisor got poached, and rightfully so. We took a very young man with a bit of lack of self-confidence and turned him into one hell of a supervisor. And unfortunately, somebody took notice of that, and they took him for a price we could not match, which is great for him. It was really cool to see him move on like that. We're currently looking for a part-time supervisor. We start interviews next week, and hopefully we'll find that position, find the right person for that position.
And I should mention, Tevin is still on us with a kind of a consulting basis. So when we need assistance, some navigations of processes, he's there.
He does the admin work. He does the admin work on Saturdays and Sundays when he's not on his other job.
And we actually were able to take him to the PIPTER conference last year in Salt Lake City, so he could understand a bit more about parking. And so it kind of opened his eyes, and he came away from that conference with a lot of ideas that could be implemented here. So he was excited about that. So next we're going to talk about the public outreach. That's something that we're pretty proud of. We're about transparency. We know that parking is the dirty little word nobody likes to talk about, and it's certainly a conversation killer at cocktail parties. But with that, we want to make sure that we try to embed ourselves within the local community and the merchants. And so Tevin, of course, he was out there knocking on doors and going in and introducing himself and explaining what the garage was, what the surface, the Center Street lot there was, you know, and about the parking rules and how validations could work and all of that. So, and we've done some press releases. As you see, we worked with Liz for that as well. We always send out some notifications to the monthly permit holders in case that when we're doing striping or cleaning or information about maybe an elevator's down, which we've had some troubles with that, as you're aware of. From a public safety training, we partnered with the local public safety group here. They did some training in the garage. And then we also created a brand new parking website that you saw that's branded Park Casper. as well as we've done some signage that we've been working with Liz on as well that will create it more of a true Park Casper so people understand what's a private lot versus what's a city lot. And then I'm going to let Dawn talk about the Christmas parade.
In 2020, we'd heard that the Christmas parade was, we had to staff it, but we couldn't charge. So what we negotiated was we could staff it. We charged a $5 flat rate. And we gave 50% of the proceeds collected to, at that time, Meals on Wheels. We asked the city what they wanted to donate the money to. And Liz Becker said Meals on Wheels. Last year when we did it, it didn't work out so well. There was blockages on the streets and the outreach and the messaging wasn't, it didn't direct people to the garage. It kind of directed them to the free parking where the state and the city have that joint parking lot. Sorry. My boss. We will try it again this year and hopefully we'll get out in front of the ball a little bit, work with outreach and messaging within the city and try to get people there. It's a great process. And again, 50% of the proceeds do go to a charity within the city as directed by the city.
The other thing we can also start doing as well as doing social media. So we've had some success in other locations where we use Twitter. We can also use Instagram. Facebook is not popular anymore, but we can send out messages about the parades that are coming up or about changes in parking or did you know that this is available, that type of thing. So that would help try to draw parking back into the city's locations. So just to kind of look at how some of your local cities, I'm going to call them, or regional cities are dealing with parking. So for the city of Cheyenne, I was involved in, well, they don't outsource my prior job. I was involved in that one when they were pulling the paid parking. So implementing the pay stations and implementing the parking program under the police department. So currently there is on-street paid parking. They also do 2 hours of free parking off the street. Typically what you're going to see here is that off-street parking is typically cheaper than your on-street because it gets people off the street and into the structures or the surface lots. With the town of Jackson, Wyoming, right now it's all free parking. And they issued actually an RFI a 1.5 years ago because they admit they have a parking problem. There's too many cars, especially during the winter season, and they're not dealing with it adequately. They issued an RFP. We were named a finalist. They also then determined they were going to put it on the back burner for a while. And they're still trying to determine what it is. They did have a parking study done, similar to what the city here of Casper had done. I think yours parking study was done in 2018. They had one that was done a little more, I think 2020. But it did say that there needed to be the implementation of a true parking program. Cedar Fort Collins, which is a few hours away, they do on-street time parking. They are migrating over to meters. They tried to do the meters about 6 years ago, epic failure. And now they're slowly moving it out again. There was too many changes going on in the time in their parking department. And just adding that to the mix, there was some confusion. So they opted to hold that off. And then of course, COVID happened. Off street, they do just an hour fee. There is no free time parking off that. And then they also have some dedicated lots. And then City of Greeley, they do on-street time parking. If you stay more than 2 hours, then you're going to pay $2 an hour up to $10. The outer areas of the city there are marked as well. So they've got some city maps that are there as well. So that's kind of in the region of what folks are doing. So you can kind of compare yourself to that. And then just kind of more, I'm going to say improving the parking program. Oftentimes what we're seeing and what Tevin was able to look at while he was the supervisor here is a lot of the folks that we're seeing, especially from who are supposed to park at the top of the structure or the garage there from the Wyoming housing apartment complex, they're actually parking on the street and they're not moving every 2 hours. And so we see that there is kind of a lack of enforcement on the street. And we do realize that community service officers are there for the community and not for parking. But he's noticed that quite a few, there's not the turnover that's there. And so we've also seen some other cars as well. Tevin was really great at kind of marking down license plates. He's kind of keeping track of where he saw them. If he saw them in the garage, where were they then when they were no longer coming back to the garage? Also, you know, with that, you can see the little graph here. We want to get them off the street, right? You want to make sure that they can get to the stores or the spas or the coffee shops, and be able to, look at the merchants, right? Without having to park a couple blocks and then go walk, right? Tends that you're gonna find is that the employees are parking right in front of that. It's just a habit. So we want to be able to try to move them around, right? And so we want to enforce those limits and move them into the garage, which will then increase your revenue as well. So John's going to kind of go over through the kind of the history of our contract since 2020, what we've kind of implemented and what we think are accomplishments.
Right, so with the implemented security improvements, what we did is we assisted the city with reviewing proposals submitted by security camera vendors. We had 2 subject matter experts working within our company that went over both proposals, or all 3 of them actually, reviewed them and provided feedback on what each vendor was offering, whether it would meet the needs as identified by the city. And at that point, the city made a decision on which vendor to choose. Deep cleaning, that is more of a process that we do at all garages where, you get into the corners, you get on a scheduled basis. You get the leaves in the winter, you get the sand in the spring, and whenever you get breaks during the winter in between snow. And making sure that that happened on a routine basis, so it cuts out the wear and tear on the vehicles, spraying more sand up on your rear fender wells and your wheel wells. ADA compliance was big. That was something that we are huge on. We have people on the West Coast that will actually go around filing lawsuits, so we take big time attention to it. So we went through the garage and helped identify all the ADA compliance needs that were not being met, which the city promptly fixed. We also looked at liability issues. Liability issues are the often overseen but catastrophic things that you don't think. A crack in the sidewalk that could grab a lady's high heel and cause her to fall. Those are the ones that we walked through the entire garage and the surface, the sidewalks around the garage and identified. I think, Liz, it was 3 hours we walked through. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a long walk. Liz compiled a list, and then her team went through and systematically eliminated all of them, because when I came back out 4 months later, they were all taken care of. Creation of a parking brand, I think you were more on that one.
Yeah, so we, as I mentioned kind of earlier, right, we prefer to create a brand. So it distincts what's a city parking lot versus what's a private lot, right? So you have the signs up there that are private and you'll be towed. So what we do is we created a Park Casper brand. In partnership with Liz and the city. So we looked at the city's colors and branding, and we created a logo. We created some signage. The signage isn't up yet. I think that was due more to some expense issues, but so we created the website as well as the brands themselves. And so we do, all of our correspondence comes out with that brand. So it's unique to the city of Casper.
Yeah, and then we've already covered the creative collaborative partnerships on the Christmas parade, which we'll continue to work with, as well as meeting with the local merchants. If there's any local merchants that change, we'll make sure that we reach out to them and help them understand how the parking functions. Validations, monthly parking, transient parking, or daily parking. And we constantly work with the city with press releases to make sure that we get information out that's pertinent.
And I think on the liability one is, and part of going back to the collaborative partnership, as we were going around to some of the different merchants there, we met with the one that's on the corner there, the Alpine Sports one. And they mentioned how the flooding happens underneath on that Center Street lot. And so we worked with Liz again on that one, so that, or snow, when the snow melted, it went down into their area. And so we made sure we could correct that as part of the liability. So again, we did take it, personally, that we wanted to make sure that they could see that we did care. It wasn't about money. It was about making that partnership there. So some of the recommendations, and I mean, these are ones that we've kind of talked with Liz about. We do really think the transition, currently right now, you've got 3-hour time parking, which is pretty a lot. We think most cities now are going down to either 1 hour or 90 minutes. City of Boulder, actually, one of their areas where there's the library, the senior center, and there's a creek with a kind of a path and a sitting area on the grass. They actually did some type of survey, and it came back that from a senior perspective at the senior center, their classes are 45 minutes. The library, the classes are an hour. So what they actually implemented was 1.5 hours of free parking per day per license plate. in certain areas around there. And that's been super positive. And then, they just pay for the extra parking after that. We've seen most other cities are going to just strictly a 1 hour or an hour and a half, depending on what's over there and what the needs are. 3 hours does seem a little long, and as you saw in some of the other ones, most of them are between 1 and 2 hours for their kind of parking. But we do think enforcement is key. Again, we do fully understand that the CFOs are there to protect the community, and parking is again that thing nobody likes to do. We were recently awarded a contract for City of Dana Point, California, where they had the same problem that you guys did. The CSOs are focused on the community. And so we actually provide one body for 40 hours a week that goes out and just does the enforcement. They do the timed area, they report directly to the Public Works group, and the Public Works sends them out. And then of course we meet with the Public Works Department, but that is an option that could happen if you want to look for that in maybe the next RFP, just to provide that supplemental support. It's big in larger cities too for street sweeping, where there's normally a third-party enforcement agency that comes and does that as well. The other thing that we've been working with Liz on the past couple of years is certainly the parking technology. The cameras were a huge help. So we were able to monitor the top where the skateboarders and everybody else were up there doing their thing. But we also are looking for that revenue solution. It still has the old solution from 2020. We've provided somewhere where you can do some mobile payments as well as a multi-space pay station. There's one down in Cheyenne, as well as there's others all over. Fort Collins will be implementing them. There's some in Denver. They're out throughout some of the cities there, where it's just a square box and they can go up to that and use their license plate. So they don't have to go back to the car and put a receipt on that, and we can track all of that as well. So those are just some of the things. We can also implement from a COVID one. I think maybe you guys have seen this as well, as not everybody's coming back to the office. There's still hybrid work, right? So there is technology out there. One technology we're using is called Honk. It's a mobile payment one, but if you think back to the old punch card that you used to buy maybe at the rec center, I know that's dating me, but you go buy your 10 punches. They actually offer that on their mobile. So you can go we can offer a special program where they can buy so many punches and they can go to the garage. They type in their license plate when they get there, and we now have them at the valid parking session. And on that one with Honk, the city doesn't have to pay anything. It's the parker. They'll pay a convenience fee. They'll pay their purchase. And then on the old Yellowstone District parking lot, we were talking to Liz about this one, and it was great that the state gave it to you, but now you have to do the upkeep of it. It's not cheap, right? So you might want to look, just a thing, possibly. We've seen it with other locations where you might see with the state about trying to make some type of, can we charge after 2 hours for parking? Just so you can cover the asphalt or the rock or the stuff, to keep it more in line. So it's not more of a revenue neutral focus than certainly more of a cost focus. Do you have anything?
Yeah, one thing on parking technology, when we submitted our RFP, we were using controlled access gates with license plate recognition, or LPR. One thing that we might want to do here in the future is get you a better idea of what's out there now. There's LPR with artificial intelligence, which is scary efficient. You can't get in or out. It literally tracks you through the garage with cameras with the license plate tagged to your car. It depends on what you all want out of your garage. Right now, the equipment is got to be early 2000s from what I've seen. We're having problems getting times printed on the tickets. It's problematic for the transient parkers, but transient parking is not a large part of your revenue at this point in time. Down the road, that's something we're going to have to take a look at.
That's all we had. So I guess more questions if anybody has any questions.
Questions? Councilor Gamma.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you both for the presentation. Really appreciate all the information. Could you go into a little bit more detail about, you said originally, it sounds like when you took over management of the parking garage, there was 6.5 occupancy from a monthly permit holder perspective, and now it's at 53%.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean, what, could you elaborate? I guess I don't know exactly what that means. That doesn't mean 53% of the available parking spots are being used by monthly permit holders, right? Okay.
Correct. So when we took over in September 1st, 2020, we were provided a list from the prior management company, and they had 113 monthly permit holders. We contacted each one of them, and most of them said they hadn't been there for a while. So in the end, we had 22 parkers we started out with. So 22 monthlies. And then of course, now we get to August of this year, and we're at 181 monthly parkers.
Okay.
So now we're sitting at, from an occupancy perspective, we've got 53%. So where typically, when the RFP was issued, there was a statement of there's so many visitor parking or transient as we call them, and then so many were allocated for monthlies. So out of our total, what we call allocation for monthlies, we're at 53%.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I have one more question.
Yes, please.
Before Jenna steps in. It sounds like we have, redid the camera system there. Could you speak to the feedback that you get regarding safety and accessibility at the structure? It might just be a public perception problem, but I hear often still people don't feel safe using the parking garage. And I have a hard time empathizing with it. I park in the garage pretty often. I think I did for the Christmas parade, and I've never had issues. And when I park there, I'll even take the scenic route and go up and down the stairwells and kind of walk around and just kind of, check out the vibe. And I've never had any experiences where I felt unsafe, but I'm a 6-foot man. Could you speak to what sort of input, what sort of feedback you get, if any, and what your perception is of, this potential public perception that it's not a safe structure to use?
Yeah, so I think in the beginning, what we saw is a lot of the parking garage, I'm gonna call it the younger generation, understood what the hours of operation were. So at night, they would go up there. So we often had in the beginning lots of calls regarding skateboarders and kids hanging out. And so I think some of the people, especially on that top floor, we had it all reserved for or I shouldn't say all, but there was a good significant portion reserved for the Wyoming
National apartments.
national apartments. So I think they felt somewhat unsafe there, which I can't blame it if you've got a lot of kids on skateboards running around. But then we installed the security cameras. We got the lighting up there better as well. So I think that did improve. I think our biggest issue that we have now is with the elevators. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, you're right. The stairwells typically used to have, when we first took over, an occasional, call them camper. That's been taken care of through constant patrols, both with us and great support from the police department here. Coming out on call, and we're just coming out on their own and doing things, which we've always appreciated. One thing you'll always find, it doesn't matter what city you're in, there's always going to be the perception that when you're in a closed space, it's not as nice as a service line where you can see everything. So I've always, in my 34 years, I've always heard that there's perceptions, regardless of what garage it is, that sometimes people do not feel safe. And they have their own personal reasons, sometimes beyond what we can control.
But yeah, so I mean, the elevators, we are working with Liz on those. We've had some park issues. And honestly, this is everywhere. We run 14 garages for San Francisco Transit Authority, and they're having issues. We can't get elevator parts as well. So there's a shortage still. But yeah, I mean, certainly we would be happy to put out some surveys. We could do some QR codes. People could scan that and go and fill in a survey, and we could get some input on what they're feeling. But we figured with the cleaning of it and the restriping, it seemed a little bit brighter. And we cleaned it up, and I know Liz has gotten some positive feedback that it seems a little brighter and more approachable. But we do appreciate the feedback because people are scared of it. We need to understand why and what we can do differently.
Councilor Jensen.
Well, thank you. Kind of just ask, okay, so your last sentence that you just did, I'm like dovetailing off of that.
I'm sorry.
So like using San Francisco, for instance, obviously I wouldn't feel safe so much in parking garage
Right.
there
I
than
know.
I do here. So what are some of the things that you've done, implemented there as far as safety that helps, that would?
Yeah, so with that one, the biggest issue we had was, as John calls them, the campers.
Yeah.
And some of them did have some mental health issues. In the end, we actually partnered with the police department there, and we had restraining orders issued on them. And then the police had to take them away, and then they learned not to come back. Other things that we're doing though is we've learned recently there's been an uptick again in some violence and thefts. So we're now closing the garages earlier, right? We're looking at what the garages are, we're closing them. They've got rolling gates and they've got doors that we can lock. And so if somebody needs to get in there, we actually have a command center there that's staffed 24/7 with the cameras. So if somebody needs in, they can call a number and then we can open the door. It's like a remote open for that as well. Yeah, so it's, yes.
Hopefully we don't get there.
Correct. But they also have a gated solution too. So any of the monthlies, they can either scan with their access code and the garage will open up, or the door will open and close. So that it's more, we're restricting it to more of the transient. And in some of the locations, there's nothing out there. No public's gonna go out there after 10 at night and start in those areas because there's nothing to go to.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so back to I could easily probably be one of the parking lot nerds.
Oh.
Because this is intriguing to me. But I'm just wondering about when you said fees and passing it on to the customer
Yep.
and all of that. When we're talking about fees, I just know that are they gonna be raised high? Are they gonna stay affordable? I mean, just because that's the attractive part, right? That for the shops downtown is that it's really reasonable to be able to have people park there.
Yep.
To use the shops.
So some of the transaction fees for mobile payment, they run anywhere from 35 cents to maybe 50 cents.
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty, on top. Now granted, you have to look at what you're charging for parking and then look at the fee. So what we do, is I've done studies before so that we can look at that and say, okay, this is what you need to, this is kind of your threshold. Now, what we could do, again, with the city is there's a lot of other validation programs that you could offer discounts to the city merchant, right?
Mhm.
That they could, buy, like you used to do, validation coupons.
Yeah.
At a reduced rate, right? Is that more of that collaborative partnership? And then they can hand those out. So when somebody comes into their, the coffee shop and they're gonna sit there, they can type in their license plate from a little tablet, which is what you have there on your desks there. And that will then give them the parking. And then we could bill back at the end, or they could buy it front. So there's lots of different ways. And I should mention part of the contract, because nobody on city council typically ever wants to talk about parking, because they just get complaints about it. But part of the contract allows the consulting for free, so that I can sit down with either one of you or a lot of you, and we can just with Liz and we talk through everything and answer your questions. So yeah, Liz has my contact info. So if you can reach out to me later if you want to just question.
One more quick thing. How many spots does it hold? How many parking spaces is the total for the entire garage? We've max capacity if you're downtown parking garage.
337.
Okay, well, just curious. Fill her up.
By the way,
Sure,
the
what else?
validation system's already set up for this garage. We've set it up for I think it's the federal courthouse jurors, because it was easier for them to try to
Mhm.
pay for their jurors than get dozens of receipts and then do reimbursables for those receipts for individuals.
Sure. That's all I have.
Anyone else? Laura, John, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Coming a long way for Tacoma. Go ahead.
Thank you. Not questions for these folks. I was wondering if the chief would entertain a question.
Chief, would you mind? Chief of Police Peters, not the man in the corner. I saw you perk up when I said chief.
Thanks, Chief. My question was, these two folks spoke a little bit to the issue of turnover not happening as it should. I'm really interested in the idea. I'm going and reading the parking study to see if, what the recommendations were made out of that study, but could you speak to, the issue the police department has with, is it lack of officers, community service officers being pulled to other areas of town? What is the struggle in your perspective of enforcing the 2-hour time limit downtown?
Mayor, council, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this. The enforcement of parking requires that have a person free to do that. And it takes that 2-hour time period. So we gotta go through and we gotta identify the cars that are there, date, timestamp them, and then come back 2 hours later to see whether or not they're in violation. During we're going on quite some extended time here. For example, last week we were down to literally just 2 of our community service officers. That meant that one was manning the front desk while the other one was doing the bin inspections. And there was no parking enforcement that was able to be done last week at all. So we have chronic staffing issues in the community service officer position, which is not to say that we have candidates in that process, trying to get our staffing back up. We just had one of our APOs want to take on a new challenge and is moving over to the community service officer position. So we're making progress in it, but the quality of our traffic and our parking enforcement is based on the availability of the staff to do that. And, for quite some time, we've been on limited staffing. We have been plagued with a little bit of extended leave, medical leave and things like that in that cadre of employees that are tasked with this responsibility. it's not from a lack of desire to do it. It's boiling down to manpower issues that are impacting much of our city organization, but virtually all of the services at the police department.
Thank you. On that note, I guess I would just offer, I know we're kind of chronically struggling to get fully staffed and, get folks recruited for community service. Metro has been understaffed, I think, the whole time I've been on council. And so I know that's a chronic issue. And so for that reason, since we have a difficult time staffing enforcement of on-street parking, I think it's worth our while. I know it's not, it doesn't get us many bonus points with the public a lot of time, anytime we bring this up, but I do think it's important to turn over parking spots downtown. And so, I don't know if we were planning on having a future discussion about, I know downtown parking kiosks is on our future agenda item. I don't know exactly what that is, but if that is going to be a good venue to have this discussion, I'm happy to just hang on to my comments and wait till that shows up on the agenda, but just wanted to be known. I think it's a worthwhile conversation. Thanks, Chief.
Sure.
Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to address the conversation prior to this. Councilor Damroff inquired about the perception of safety. The police department has been making a concerted effort to be present in the parking garage. Officers are writing their reports while parked in the garage now. We're definitely having an increased presence down there to stop any vandalism that may be occurring, provide a preventative presence, and to keep things from spiraling out of control. I myself have been through the garage multiple times. They probably see me on their videos all the time, skulking around the parking garage, and the lighting is monumentally better than it was historically. And I would submit to you, it's one of the cleaner, more safe parking garages that I've ever been in, but even I myself have been patrolling the parking garage.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I feel like I'm already monopolizing the conversation. No further questions, Chief, but thank you for those points. I think I've stated as much multiple times on council, but to reiterate, I use the parking garage a lot. I've never had any negative experiences. I think it's great when it's super hot outside, you get out of the sun, so your car stays cool. When it's winter and you got snow coming down, you don't have to wipe off your car and scrape off the ice. I love it. I think when the elements, protects you from the elements. And so I'm always surprised on parade day when I go to the parking garage and there's all these empty spaces and I'm just wondering why. It's great, it's convenient, it's within 2 blocks of pretty much anywhere you want to go downtown. And I guess I would just encourage folks, if they've had negative experiences at the parking garage in the past, give it a shot again. I park there all the time, and again, maybe I'm biased in some respects, but never had issues. I always like parking in the parking garage, so thank you.
I'm in there every day. We have monthly spots. My wife and I both, her office and mine are downtown, so we use it all the time. I've never had any issues in there at all. So anyway, thank you folks for coming. I appreciate it. Tacoma's a long way. So, all right, let's move on to the ever exciting power rate discussion, sir.
Mr. Mayor, this is an item that was requested by the council to have some discussion pursuant to comments ostensibly that you're receiving from your constituency and so on. So we asked if we could get some help from Mr. Morrissey and his team, and he's certainly obliged, and we're grateful for that. My hope is that Mr. Morrissey could go over some of the need that is behind the rate request to the PSC and allow for some opportunity for all of you to ask questions if that pleases the council.
I believe it certainly does, and I know it'll certainly please our constituents to try to wrap their head around a 29% increase. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Mr. Mayor, City of Casper Council. My name is Mike Morrissey. I brought Dave Eskelson with me on the Teams or Zoom call here. Dave, can you hear us all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thanks. Yes, this is a large rate increase that we have not seen in recent history for Rocky Mountain Power. I'm going to give a little bit of a background. Dave, you can feel free to interject. Correct me if you feel necessary. But there's 2 things that make up our rate. 2 charges. One of them is our energy cost adjustment mechanism that's done annually. Every year, it goes up, and sometimes, believe it or not, it goes down, typically within the 1.5%, 2% range. That's about a third of our overall rate. The other 2/3 of our overall rates are made up of what's called the base rate. That's the hard one this time. That's the 21.5% roughly rate increase, plus this ECAM, or energy cost adjustment mechanism, which makes up the other 1/3, which is about 8%. So all said and done, you're right on the mark. It's very close and easily rounded up to 30%. So it's a 29.5% overall rate increase request that we have submitted to the Public Service Commission in Cheyenne. We've asked for both of those, and both of them are being adjudicated, or they'll be reviewed by the Public Service Commission in what we call our general rate case in October, late October, we expect. However, the ECAM, or Energy Cost Adjustment Mechanism, which addresses fuel, I should back up and explain what that is. That's cost of fuel, coal to make power, cost of fuel to run our line trucks. Just here in our Casper Service Center, I would guess we probably burn about 250 gallons of diesel fuel a week, probably comparable to the city of Casper, which is a lot more money than it was 2 years ago. And the natural gas costs were much higher a year ago. Probably in the last 6 months, you'll argue with me that it has come down quite a bit, and that is true. Natural gas prices have come down, but we're trying to capture those costs that are in the rearview mirror. So with that, I was going to invite Dave to just kind of give an overview of the other part of it, the base rate. So that's the cost, and he'll get into those details, what's driving the base rate charge being asked to increase 21.5%. So Dave, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's important to recognize that there are two separate proceedings that are related. In March, we filed the general rate increase request. It's 21.6% on average, but different rate classes will be affected differently depending on their cost of service. And then in April, we filed the annual cost adjustment mechanism at 7.6% on average. The annual energy cost adjustment went into effect on an interim basis on July 1st, and that'll be reviewed by the commission and could be adjusted, probably in December is when that usually happens, when they do a review. But both of these cases are related because the main driver is the same, and that's what we call net power costs. And that's the cost of natural gas for our power plants, coal for our power plants, and the cost of purchased power on the wholesale market. And both of these, all three of these factors have been increasing in recent years. The reason it affects the general rate request is that one of the functions of a general rate review is to reset the level of net power costs that's embedded in customer rates. And because that hasn't been done since 2020, the increase in those costs have been significant, both in 2021 and 2022. Just to give you an idea of what we're seeing, since 2021, natural gas fuel prices have increased 89%. And the company's coal fuel prices have increased 38%. And open market costs have increased 199%. And it's important to note that the company doesn't make a profit on these costs, but we absolutely recognize the impact that an increase of this magnitude has on our customers and the economies of the communities that we serve. And this is happening in the other states we serve as well. So that's kind of what we're seeing as far as drivers in both of these cases. There'll be, particularly with the general rate request, there is pre-filed testimony that the company makes where we have testimony of our expert witnesses and supporting evidence. And then interveners in the case also file their case after analyzing the company's request. And then the commission holds hearings. Typically the witnesses for the various parties are cross-examined. The commission questions them, and then the commission deliberates and will probably issue a decision, before the end of the year. So that's kind of the landscape that we're looking at.
Dave, if I could, I would just amplify net power costs. Could you give some examples of where we have to buy transmission power or bulk electric power?
Yeah, we're a buyer and a seller in this wholesale market every day. Now, the vast majority of power that we supply to our customers is power that is in facilities that we own or that we have long-term contracts with. But somewhere between 10 and 20% of the power that we supply in a year comes from the wholesale market. Most of the time, that wholesale market is very reasonably priced. But in cases where usually weather events can create a significant demand on that market, like any other market, when the commodity gets scarce, the price goes up. And in 2022, we had two events, one in the winter, which created a spike in wholesale prices, and one in the summer, which again created a spike in wholesale prices. And so that was a significant driver of the net power costs in this case. Now, we make these purchases generally to maintain balance on our transmission system. Electricity, in the amounts that we use, it can't be stored. So we have to maintain that balance between what customers are using and what our system is supplying, plus or minus 5% every minute of every day. And those short-term market purchases help us to do that. Whatever money that we make by selling some of our energy, because we're both a buyer and a seller in this market, is credited to customers. That's why it's called net power costs, because it's the cost of fuel, the cost of purchased power, minus the cost of any revenue that we realize from power sales on the open market.
Thanks for that. I'll throw it to you, Mr. Mayor.
Mike, I would ask you, can you tell me, Casper, Wyoming, what percentage of your customer base receives power here in Casper, Wyoming? Of your broad $139 billion company, what percentage of power?
I can give you numbers that I haven't done the percentage calculation, so we could get there. In the summer cooling months, which are the biggest demand for the Casper area, approximately 330 megawatts is the consumption. To give you a feel for what a megawatt is, a good example is a typical wind farm when it's all the wind turbines are turning, will generate somewhere in the vicinity between 90 and 110 megawatts. So it could consume 3 full wind farms during the summer cooling. Second biggest consumption season is winter heating. Casper was built on a lot of electric heat, so there still is a fair amount of electric heat. And then to give you a feel for what our overall network or grid, all the customers are balanced in our dispatch center in Salt Lake. They're balancing around, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think it's 18,000 megawatts. Is that somewhere in the right vicinity?
Yeah, it varies. Our entire system generation capacity is about 12,000 megawatts, and so the demand of customers, varies throughout the day.
The reason for my question was, so you're selling 12,000 megawatts. We're using 300 of those. this 29.5% rate increase, I'm assuming is all the way across the entire spectrum of, it's not just Casper, it's your entire,
Yes, this is for all ratepayers in the state of Wyoming. The state of Utah is gearing up for their next pain point, which will be another rate case for them. And every one of our 6 states that are involved in Pacific Corp's footprint, which involves Washington State, Oregon State, extreme Northern California, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming are Rocky Mountain Power. The others are Pacific Power, but they're all under the umbrella of Pacific.
will those other states see increases to this magnitude?
Unfortunately, I don't know about the magnitude. Dave, do you have a feel for the magnitude? They are seeing increases.
It's similar because the generation and transmission system for Pacific Corp is operated as an integrated system for all 6 states. So net power costs affect the entire company, and each state, being individually regulated by its state commission, pays its share of the use of the transmission and generation network. So these are costs that are allocated to the state of Wyoming based on its use of the transmission and generation network.
Well, if you could kind of figure out where I was going here, we're using 300 out of 12,000, yet our increase is at or above what everyone else is at. So it seems to our constituents that have reached out to me that we're being asked to carry the load, or a much greater load than someone else who's using a lot more of that power than we are.
Well, there again, the individual state regulation ensures that each state only pays for its use of the system. And the magnitude of this has more to do with the fact that we haven't had a general rate review since 2020. And before that, it was 2015. So it has more to do with the last time that net power costs were set in a general rate case than what's going on in the other states.
Well, and where this is coming from for me, and you must understand, the city of Casper is also a utility provider. We provide water, we provide sewer, we provide trash. So I understand, but a 30% increase is so vast and so large at one time for our constituents to take, with everything else around them rising. Everyone's budgets are being stretched to the max as it is. And now we're going to throw a 30% increase, especially on our fixed income people. And it's creating a huge financial burden on the people that live in our town. And I don't know what the answer is. Like I said, we're a utility provider as well, and I get it. The bills have to get paid. But
Let me just interject if I may, Mr. Mayor.
I got you.
One of data points I wanted to put out, Black Hills Energy provides electric power to the city of Cheyenne. A couple months ago, they put in a general rate case request for 16%. They were granted 8%. What is going to happen in our case, no one knows. Those arguments are yet to happen. When they do happen and all of it is shaken out, who knows what we'll get. But I would be surprised if it's close to 29.5%.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure that you folks know that there are, and our constituents know, that we are fighting for them. We're trying to find some common ground. We understand both sides of this, and
Sure.
we've got to speak up for our people too. Lisa, Go ahead.
And we absolutely understand that. And I think it might be important to note that part of the reason that this is happening in the order it's happening is that electric utilities tend to be a lagging industry. So the inflationary pressures in the general economy that were affecting natural gas, coal prices particularly, that were occurring in 2021 and 2022 are only now being considered as becoming part of the rate structure for Wyoming. And that tends to be a feature of electric utility business. We tend to come in later when inflationary pressures have affected rates.
Counselor?
Yeah, a couple questions. So for, these rates, he's saying that we haven't had a rate increase since 2020, but we have had some kind of an increase last year and the year prior. So what do you call those increases?
So remember the explanation I started out with, you have a third of our rates are energy cost adjustment mechanism that is done annually. Then there is the rest of it, the 2/3, that's a general rate case that we're applying for now for 21.5%. That hasn't been done since 2020. So it's, yeah, we'll see adjustments, and in fact, we saw on January 1st, we saw a decrease. It's never noticeable, but it was minus 0.8%, went down. But yeah, the general rate case, the bulk of the base rates haven't been adjusted or requested to be adjusted since 2020.
How much of this increase and everything is going towards EVs and Bitcoin and trying to get your guys' power grid up and playing so that it's preparing for that?
Fair question. Dave, I'll take it unless you want to. But EVs, if a new charging station is being requested to be put on our network, that customer will pay for the conditions necessary to supply that power to electric vehicles. For example, Hat 6 has a charging station. The rest of all of us as ratepayers did not pay for that charging station. Hat 6 or whoever manages that charging station paid for that and the cost to connect to our electric grid. If there were upgrades on our grid required to support that, they also paid for those upgrades. And there was another part of that question.
Yes,
You asked about the EVs and what was the other part of it?
The Bitcoin.
Oh, yes.
So when you're saying that, so because they pay to have it installed, and it is drawing more power from your grids.
Mhm.
And so they're paying the additional payment to draw that extra power, or is that being disseminated amongst the public?
So what you're asking, I'm just going to repeat, make sure I understand it. You're saying the additional bulk electric or transmission power necessary to feed an EV charging station is paid for by that customer in their cost of energy consumed and their demand, which is how fast they consume that electricity. But I think, Dave, what the counselor may be asking really is if net power costs have to increase to supply EVs, is that fair for the rest of our ratepayers? Did I summarize that right? Okay. Is that a fair? Do you understand, Dave?
Well, yeah, and I think, this is, in terms of magnitude, this is about the fuel to run our power plants, and that's mostly, our natural gas power plants and our coal plants. That capacity hasn't increased because those power plants are existing. But the vast majority in the general case, more than 95% of it is related to these specific costs. And, only about 3 or 4% is related to infrastructure costs. The building of new power plants or the building of new infrastructure, poles, wires, the transmission systems. So almost all of both of these, well, all of the energy cost adjustment is fuel and purchase power, and more than 95% of the general case is fuel and purchase power.
Well, and let's be clear, this is not a Rocky Mountain Power issue. They are a business that is trying to sustain and survive. This goes directly to the Biden administration, who has destroyed coal and destroyed natural gas. And we live in a state that is a mass producer of both. And they have made them so expensive to get now. This is the ultimate price we're paying because of that. Is that not true?
I can't disagree with your argument there. Yes, the EPA is making regulations to operate our thermal plants more and more difficult, more pollution controls, which drive up our costs for operations and push us and incentivize us to distribute more sustainable, renewable energy, which requires more conductor, more transmission lines, more transformers. All of that combined is driving up the cost of power for all utilities across the US. We are not the only one doing this. We are probably one of the highest requests right now because of what Dave has explained. We're looking 2 to 3 years in the rearview mirror to catch up. But all utilities, including rural electrics, are being forced to figure out how to capture more money to pay for their cost of power delivered.
And I would just
Go ahead.
observe, I would just observe that, you know, regarding the regulations affecting our coal and natural gas plants related to the Clean Air Act, these go back, you know, far beyond the current administration. You know, the Clean Air Act was originally passed in 1972, and it's been amended several times since then. It was designed to become more restrictive over time. And so these restrictions that are being applied to, you know, particularly fossil fuel electric generation have been getting more and more restrictive over decades, not just in recent years.
Counselor?
What I was going to bring up or ask about is you're saying that since 2001, natural gas prices have gone up 89%, which that would mean that natural gas was selling for $1.39 in 21. That's not right. As of yesterday, Henry Hub was at 2. Come on.
Dave, do you have natural gas numbers at your fingertips?
NYMEX gas was 261 yesterday. It was 280 a week ago.
Okay.
It hasn't been over $3, but maybe 2 months in the last 2 years. How are we getting an 89% rate increase and claiming that gas prices are up 89%? I work in that business. I know what gas sells for. And gas has not been your $8 and $9 like it was 6 and 8 years ago.
Well,
It hit five something on the spot market for about a month and a half last winter. And that's the highest it's been. So you average that with this 280, 260, we're within our 5-year average right now in gas storage. I mean, come on, guys.
Well, let's see what Dave has.
the information that I supplied about what natural gas and coal prices have done comes from our pre-filed testimony. I'm not personally an expert in that business, but we do have people that are, and they provide this sworn testimony as well as evidence to back it up. Now that will be adjudicated, and that will certainly be debated over the course of the commission case. So all I'm doing is relaying what's in our pre-filed testimony.
Okay, as a follow-up.
Sure.
Well, and I don't like the idea either. When I was in the military, it was a use it or lose it philosophy. So they would go out the end of the month, go out and dump jet fuel. They would burn up ammunition so they didn't lose an allotment. When I was in the oil field, people used to put in their budget knowing it was going to get cut, so they would over budget. I think that is a poor way to run a business, period, across the board. So I would be much more resilient to you coming in with a budget that you didn't figure was going to get cut, which you have admitted you're going to do, and come in with what would be considered a reasonable budget. And I don't think you would have the angst amongst the consumers or anybody else. So,
Well, I'm not going to argue with Warren Buffett's way of doing business because he's pretty damn smart about it. But I will tell you that this is going to be discerned through PSC, and they're going to do their due diligence, and we'll see where the rate falls. I mean, that's really what it is. And I appreciate you gentlemen coming and giving us some information. Our constituents are worried. They're concerned, as are we. And so this type of information is good for us to hear and have some tangible things to look at. But realistically, until the Public Service Commission takes it under advisement and makes their decisions, this is where we are. I feel for you guys, I do. I understand the regulations out there. I get it. We, like I said, we are a utility provider as well, right here in the city of Casper. And we understand the increases and the differences. And it can be contentious at times, and I'm sorry for that, but I appreciate you being here and sharing with us. So,
If I could add one last.
yes,
thing.
please.
You probably are aware that in 2 nights from now, on Thursday, there's a Public Service Commission public hearing scheduled over at the Thyra Thompson building. Many of these discussion points will be revisited then.
And I'll see you there. I'll be there.
Great.
So thank you, John.
Thank you for inviting
Yeah,
us.
I appreciate it. Dave, thanks for joining us.
My
Was there
pleasure.
anybody else that had a question? I'm sorry. Please wait just a second. Was there any?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks. Again, this will probably be covered Thursday. I don't think I'm brilliant enough to come up with anything novel that people that know way more about this industry would be able to ask themselves. But I was curious about, so I totally understand some of these statistics that are shared, 38% increase in coal fuel for 24, 89%. And I think this is what Councilor Kathy was getting to, the 89% natural gas prices since 2021. We've gotten information from folks who are, concerned about this and have sort of done some of their due diligence, some of their research. Not an expert in this industry, but it does look as if there was a spike in natural gas prices in the year 2022. But I think what Councilor Kathy was alluding to is that those have sort of normalized and gone back down. The ECAM adjustment of 7.6%, is that not intended to help recover the costs of those high energy prices the past couple of years? Is that not what that adjustment is for? And
I'll say yes, but I think Dave can elaborate even further.
The ECAM prices are for actual costs the company spent in 2022. The net power cost level in the general rate case is a forward-looking cost that looks at 2024 and in the future. So ECAM looks backward. The general rate reset for net power cost is a forward-looking estimate.
Thank you, Dave, for that information. So it does sound like the ECAM adjustment of 7.6% is to help recover those increased fuel costs from the past 2 years. So the assumption then is that, does Rocky Mountain Power expect natural gas prices to return to those, extraordinary levels that we realized last year? Is that the assumption then, and why you're asking for the general rate case increase?
Well, the net power cost forecast for general rates is about $2.5 billion for total net power costs. That is natural gas, coal, and purchase power. The level that is embedded in current rates right now is $1.4 billion. So in resetting what we think the level of appropriate net power costs to be included in rates is significantly higher than is currently embedded in rates. That's the reason why net power costs are affecting the general rate request to such a degree.
Okay, thank you. One further question, if I may, and then I'll let you guys get on your way, because again, I don't want to be redundant. I'm sure a lot of this will be covered Thursday. I had a question though about the analysis Rocky Mountain Power had done in regards to the average home using 709 kilowatts a month and being 1,000 square foot. I was curious, where did those figures come from? Because we've gotten some information from, again, constituents that are concerned that those are, I guess, unrealistically low. The $16.42 a month that Rocky Mountain Power is projecting for folks, their utility bill to increase, it's based on that 709 kilowatts a month and 1,000 square footage. But I was just curious where those figures come from.
That's a calculation that our regulation department does for us when we write a news release. We're always asked for a typical effect. That is a calculation based on the average use of the residential class. And it is, you know, much lower than a lot of residential customers use. Our residential class is pretty wide in its you know, use every month. It ranges from, you know, 300 kilowatt hours a month on the low end to you know, several thousand kilowatt hours on the part of larger residential users. So the 700 kilowatt hour a month calculation is a median average of our residential class.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Dave, thanks again. We'll see you Thursday, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, sir. You're welcome. Any other questions or comments from the dais? No? Okay, it's Mike. All right, let's move on to our camping ordinance, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, everybody. This is a request that really comes as the product of the Homeless Coalition discussions that have been occurring for some time now. Some of you have been in those meetings and witnessed personally some of the dialogue and discussion that's taking place. A similar conversation was had a number of years ago, and some changes were made, but they didn't quite go the distance in terms of equipping our officers and some of our other staff with regard to some of the things that really need to be looked at more acutely now. And that's why we're here, to talk about some of those deficiencies and hopefully get feedback from you that would help us mend those gaps, if you will. The city attorney has been working diligently with regard to not only studying language options that you could consider, but also studying a lot of the latest litigation with regard to similar ordinances of this nature around the country and even in the western part of our country that you probably read about in your memo here. We are anticipating that a lot of the discussion that we need help with deals with private property concerns and issues, which is very consistent with a lot of the complaints the coalition discusses. And it's our hope that pursuant to these conversations and others that will take place invariably throughout the reading process will help us hopefully get to a conclusion that we can more effectively incorporate. And so with that, Mr. Vice Mayor, if I could turn the time over to our city attorney to walk us through the bulk of this. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, councilors. I'll just start off by saying took every ounce of restraint I had to not step into the cross-examination mode during the past prior presentation, having spent several days studying rate cases. I just had tons of questions, but we'll reserve that for Thursday. So I'm before you today to talk about potential changes to our camping ordinance. And before I get into kind of the specifics, I wanted to just touch a little bit on generally what the homeless initiative, task force, coalition, whatever we are calling it, is working on. When we've been before this council previous, there was some desire to make sure that we were looking at this issue holistically, not just simply through one lens of enforcement or one lens through social services. And I'd like to report, and happy to report, that I think we are doing that. We've really kind of coalesced as a group and identified some major areas of need in addition to enforcement. And so we're currently working on solutions to housing of all sorts, transportation, working to continue to collect data. We're still waiting on the YSAC grant, but that will hopefully give us the opportunity to work with the University of Wyoming to collect data here in our community to better address the issues of homelessness. Christy Oster, who works for the Mercer House, is doing a phenomenal job with outreach. She's working with folks that are incarcerated, working with our municipal courts to get folks that are arrested on public intox or that are otherwise homeless and doing assessments, mental health assessments, and trying to kind of break that cycle of arrest, incarcerate, release, and repeat, so to speak. So a lot of good stuff going on with regard to the other areas that I would say besides enforcement. With regard to enforcement, so we currently have an ordinance that prohibits camping in public spaces within the city of Casper. And that's been on the books for a couple of years, and I'm starting to get reports from my deputy, and it does appear that we're starting to process more of these cases. Today, for instance, we had an individual who's arrested for camping in our downtown parking structure that we just discussed. So that is a testament to the fact that we are doing routine patrols, enforcing the laws that are currently on the books, so to speak. And, you know, a lot of this is not necessarily illegal camping, but public intoxication and other things that we have. So we're utilizing the tools that we currently have. Another enforcement mechanism, and this will really, I think, tie into what I'm going to talk about in terms of proposed changes, is we've taken a more aggressive approach to code enforcement. And we've currently, in the last 3 weeks or so, have tagged 4 different structures, 3 residences and a commercial property as being unsafe buildings. How does this tie into what we're addressing here today? Well, take, for instance, one of these residences. The owner is deceased a couple years ago. There was no family. The house is in limbo. There's no water. There's no electricity, and they're squatters, right? And so they're just camping in the yard, breaking into the building, camping within the facility, creating blight, health, and safety issues. By tagging these buildings as unsafe, it unlocks other code enforcement tools to kind of do away with those issues within our residential areas. Within your memo, I gave a brief, and I think it's a brief, probably, you probably heard this a little bit, but there's several cases that have worked through the 9th Circuit in Idaho and now Oregon, dealing with ordinances regulating camping in public areas. And there's a test, and I won't go into the specifics unless you'd like me to, but the long and the short of it is the city of Grants Pass in Oregon has recently sought review by the U.S. Supreme Court because there is a dissent in that case, and there's some thought among different legal circles that that was too restrictive of a view. And so we're waiting to see if the Supreme Court takes it up. If they do, then we'll have binding law that will guide us as we continue to address these issues in the public sphere. If they don't take it, then we're really without any 10th Circuit authority, and so we'll continue to navigate it as best we can. But really, the areas that we identified as kind of needing the most attention had to do, well, first of all, with cleanup of campsites, illegal campsites on public property. And after working with the group and working with staff, I've determined that the best way to proceed there is through a standard operating procedure. So we have put something like that together. It's been put into practice on a couple of occasions. We've actually sought restitution through the municipal court in a couple of instances for costs that were incurred in cleaning up unhealthy and dangerous campsites. But one issue that has been difficult for law enforcement to overcome is when you have a private piece of property and you have people that are within the city limits and they're camping on that property. Oftentimes, the owner is out of state or can't be reached, and it's impossible to ascertain whether or not those folks have the ability to be on that property. Because right now there is not a blanket prohibition on camping on private property within the city of Casper. And so one proposal that we would like guidance on has to do with enacting an ordinance that would give us a little more enforcement authority with regard to private property. And as you'll see, you saw in the memo, there's a number of cities, many of them in Colorado, because frankly, Wyoming cities and towns haven't really taken too much action on this. Cheyenne recently enacted a curfew that covered a park, public park in Cheyenne that was very narrowly tailored. That was the only kind of movement that I've seen. But what we would propose is an ordinance amendment that would, if there's a call through a piece of private property and there's individuals that are camping there, that they be required to either show written proof of ownership or written proof of express permission to be on that property. This gives this would give law enforcement a very easy avenue to making contact and ascertaining whether or not they legally can be there or not. Because right now, and Chief McFeeters could certainly speak to this, if we approach them and say, do you have permission to be here? If they say yes, that kind of restricts our ability to enforce. So I'm seeing this in Denver. They enacted an ordinance that required written permission to be provided, written as opposed to just oral, because that's much more, difficult. Then you have to verify it. The other thing that I've seen in a number of municipalities is putting a time restriction on your ability to camp within city limits, even on private property. Now, I would say that this would exempt a campground if you've got a KOA or something like that. Otherwise, that would be exempted. But outside of an authorized campground, what I've seen is a limitation on 7 consecutive days, or in a limit of 14 days in a calendar year. Now, let me be clear. I don't think what we're proposing is that we would adopt an ordinance like this. Now we're going to be going to the neighbors whose children are camping in the backyard during the summer. That's not what we're talking about. I think we've seen instances again where we've got these dilapidated structures that are on private property that people are essentially squatting, camping there for long periods of time, sometimes camping in a dilapidated trailer. And so giving us the ability to require written proof of authorization and then limiting it to a reasonable number of days, we think would be helpful. And certainly 7 days and 14 days are not set in stone. Those are certainly up to discussion, but that's what I've seen employed elsewhere. Finally, with regard to this proposal, in various cities, enforcement can take different shapes, right? So in Denver, there was an agreement reached in a court case that requires the city of Denver, before they arrest or cite somebody for illegal camping on private property, to orally warn them, to give them an opportunity to vacate, to offer social services, all kinds of things. Not necessarily advocating that we do that, but there certainly can be built in some due process or procedures when it comes to enforcement. But overall, I think that an ordinance of this sort would certainly give our law enforcement more flexibility and a greater ability to, again, and just to be clear, not arrest people because they're homeless, but it's to address those negative impacts that are occurring within our city. So I'll stop with that and answer any questions that Mayor or Council might have.
Anyone? Counselor?
It isn't a question so much as the idea of putting limits on camping is a very viable option. When I was in Portland, and not necessarily even just in the downtown, but when trying to get out of town over towards Mount Hood, you go through what I would consider residential suburb area, and you would see trailers with no car around and more junk piled around it than I can get in 3 pickups. And so you obviously know they've been there for quite some time. And we definitely don't want to go down that type of a road. So I think having restrictions on that type of camping is very appropriate and very adequate. So
Counselor Pollock.
Thank you. Would you recommend, that seems to me that mechanism would address it as would the requiring written permission. Would you recommend an either or approach or a both and approach?
Mayor, Councilor, from my perspective, I think both make the most sense, because, we have had instances where you may have a, lack of a better term, ne'er-do-well property owner that's gonna let everybody and their brother come and camp on their property and have a grand old time. And that may be fine for 7 days, but when we're getting complaints from the neighbors that, hey, they've been there for 3 months and they're living outside, and we've had instances where we've had city crews have to go out and remove buckets of excrement and so forth. So I think, having both would give us the most, flexibility to address the situation. And obviously our officers are going to use discretion based on the situation.
as
Counselor Ingebrigtsen.
I was gonna say, as a follow-up to my comment and then Amber's, basically the situation I was talking about was the trailer was parked on the street and their garbage was where you would have had a car either side of it and on the sidewalk. So it wasn't even on private property, it was on public property. So again, I think the idea of both is a great idea.
This is just more of a comment than anything. I'm somewhat hesitant to following what Denver is doing, just because they have created a monumental situation to where they cannot get a hold of. So I think that we need to take a little bit more of a firmer approach on this. And, I think that just saying, hey, we'll come back in 3 or 4 days, check on you to make sure that you've got your written permission kind of a thing. No, it's because I think that unfortunately, this is a situation that if you give an inch, they're going to take a mile. And then it's going to be challenging ordinances. And then we're going to have to keep changing them every single situation. So I kind of think that we need to develop an ordinance or ordinances that's going to be protecting of public and private properties and have a firm approach so that the police officers know across the board of how to deal with it.
Mayor, Councilor Ingebrigtsen, no, that's a great point. And just to be clear, so the enforcement that's required in Denver is the product of a consent decree. And so we're certainly don't have that same situation where, there's been a lawsuit and we're settling it. And so I've seen similar language in other municipalities requiring the permission or limiting the days. It was somewhat unique to Denver to require kind of all those after steps before you could actually cite or arrest somebody. So I think that would be appropriate to have a much shorter time frame to, once they're notified that, before they would be cited or further enforcement action would be taken. And I think what this also does is, some of this we can declare it a nuisance and we can approach it that way. But our timeframes for enforcement through the code enforcement process is much, much longer. There are, certified mailings that have to be, and that's a whole nother can of worms that we're looking at to see if we can't expedite it. But that's a balance too, because when you're talking about property rights, private rights, you've got to have some due process. So that's kind of a separate issue where this would, I think, be the most expedient way to enforce. And just to Councilor Kathy's point, and this really gets into kind of my second proposal. So vehicles on the street is yet another issue. And so what I've seen in several, and I think I cited one, is a prohibition on camping on the street or camping in a vehicle. And that would be within a car, within an RV, and what my proposal would be is to look at adopting an ordinance that after, I thought it was a good compromise. You get a day, and then after a day, you can't be sleeping in that vehicle on the street. And so that would be the second somewhat related ordinance proposal that I would have.
Is there not an ordinance already in place of disallowing people camping in the driveway or on the street in their RV? Or we
Mayor,
already have that?
Counselor, we've got some ordinances in code enforcement with regard to that, but it has been so difficult to enforce, and Ms. Jividen could probably speak to that more clearly. But it's trying to catch them living in it for a certain period of time, where I think that if we just, pass something that said it's without permission, it's not allowed, and after X number of days, it's just not allowed, I think that gives us more of an ability to enforce it from a PD perspective.
Councilor Cameron.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks, Eric, for all the information. I appreciate the research you've done and continue to do. It convinces me that we're taking a real balanced approach to this. To Councilor Engebretsen's concerns about not mimicking what other cities have done, I also had that concern, but I also think in places like Denver, you're seeing the pendulum kind of swing back. They've had such kind of flexible and I'm not using this in an ideological way, but liberal kind of policies in regards to allowing people to do this camping, and they've seen such issues that they're now, the pendulum's kind of swinging back, and I think they are getting a little more heavier handed in their approach. So I think there's things that we can learn from what other cities are doing, because they've had this issue for a lot longer than us and have kind of tried and experimented with a lot of things. Thank you, Eric, for bringing up the issue or the ordinance that they passed in Cheyenne. I was also following that. The Crow Creek area in Cheyenne, they implemented this curfew, and it was the result of people camping along the river. It was impacting the businesses in that area. Trail users did not feel safe using that area, and people were actually defecating in the creek, and that was evidenced by increased levels of E. coli and stuff. So it was a legitimate public safety issue. So I'm happy so far with the direction we're moving in this. I do think people should be allowed their due process, and there should be, an appeals process that's part of that. But I agree with Councilor Engebretsen that these timelines should be tight. We should be looking to expedite in whatever ways we can, having those firm boundaries. But I do think people should be afforded the opportunity to, present their case, so to speak, in regards to any justification or permission they may have to be in those areas. I think they should be allowed that opportunity, but I do think we should keep these timelines tight and be ready to enforce whatever ordinances we do create. Thank you.
Councilor.
My turn?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think I would ask, I'm comfortable with a number of elements of this. I think particularly the trying to get a handle around camping on private property and the issues, sort of the gaps that we have currently existing. And I think it's a sensible approach. I like the idea of creating both mechanisms. I'm pretty uncomfortable around the trying to start dealing with vehicles at this point. I might like to see us take a sort of sequenced approach, like we'll do this, see what the impacts are, see how we're doing. And I say that because I have known a number of individuals where the vehicle was like the last line before they were literally on the streets. And so if you're dealing with situations where people's vehicles get impounded, that's not only their shelter at that moment, but is their transportation potentially to or from a job or to or from resources. And so taking away somebody's vehicle or, ability to have access to a vehicle for shelter is, basically removing sort of the last vestige of access that they could potentially have. And so I don't know to what extent we've seen cases of that are becoming public health issues and things like that. I do think that the case has been made for that in the vacant building situation, that sort of thing. So I might be an advocate for, taking a little bit of a step-by-step approach here and try to tackle what was presented to us as sort of the most pressing element of this issue while we continue to build out resources, because I simply don't think we have a solution for if somebody's already on the street, but living in the car is better than living on the street. And I would hate to wrap somebody up in a situation where they no longer have access to that sort of last line of defense before they're on a bench somewhere. So, so I might advocate for a step-by-step approach, and we start with the private property camping. I agree with the riparian proximity and public water source proximity. Some of those things, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And maybe take a wait and see approach on vehicles.
Councilor Kathy.
My question was gonna be in terms of the 7 to 14 day camping and with the campers and things, how was that going to apply to the brother-in-law that comes in with his camper and is staying in the camper for 4 or 5 days in front of your house? Is he going to be exempt from something like that, or are we gonna try to force them to go to a campground or something like that?
Mayor, Councilor, so the way I've seen it drafted, it would not necessarily exempt that. I guess a couple of things that I would say is, one, if, you know, the brother-in-law is there for 4 or 5 days and we're not all up all night partying and they're being clean, it's probably not gonna be reported. And I don't think we've got the staff nor the inclination to be out looking for those types of things. So from a practical standpoint, it probably isn't going to matter. There's other ways we can look at, you know, addressing that. It would raise a level of complexity in terms of administration.
What you're saying is it's probably going to be going along the lines of our feeding of the squirrels and things like that type of a situation.
I think that's correct.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Just a couple points. I agree with Amber. I think we can maybe pull the brakes a little bit on the vehicle part of that. I do agree with that. Second, the only other comment I have, because I agree, the suggestions for those ordinances, I think they're pragmatic. I think they're a good approach to it. But I think we need to be real careful. You know, we can be real strong, but we also have to be real super careful of due process and making sure that we don't violate, you know, rights. And everybody can sit and say, well, we got to get them off the street, and which I agree with to an extent. But I think we have to be also mindful of that and making sure that we are paying attention to the rights. So,
Councilor.
Thank you. To Steve's point, I had the same concern, and, you know, trying to balance what people are and are not allowed to do on their own private property. I'm a little concerned with taking the approach to say, you know, probably people won't turn them in. I think there are a lot of neighbors who are very irritated that their neighbors have a big camper parked in their driveway and might be very inclined to make a complaint. Even if they weren't partying all night or whatever, I think that they could definitely be inclined to make a complaint. So, you know, I would suggest that we, you know, set a time frame that we believe is a reasonable amount of time if somebody did have family in town. Like, I don't think, you know, that property probably doesn't have hookups and all of these things that you would need to create like a long-term desirable environment for somebody to be staying in an RV in your driveway, short-term perhaps. So I think we should determine, like, you know, how long do we think it's, you know, appropriate. And also, I know we don't want to add complexity, but you know, we could consider adding some sort of, you know, if you've exceeded this time and are posing some sort of public health risk by the nature of your camping, or, you know, some sort of tiered approach. But I actually would have concerns about, like, sort of leaving it to neighborliness to determine if it's going to be enforced or not.
Councilor.
So I just wanted, like, I'm looking at Eric, your letter that you had here in our file, where you talk about lastly, with the river and things like that. Would we be able to do that? Make sure that within 100 feet or so of the river, just to protect that pathways and the bridges and.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilor, so I hadn't even gotten to that, and I know, pleased to see that people have read it.
Hey, this group does their homework.
I see that. But yeah, that would be an adjunct. In my mind, I think that there's a really strong health and safety argument to be made to say that you know, regardless of property, status, you can't camp within, you know, 100 feet is what I've seen. And that's because of, the, danger of, you know, waste being deposited into the waterway and creating a hazard. So that, you know, I would actually think that would be yet another potential change that would kind of work hand in glove. There may be some overlap, maybe some redundancy, but it would just be very crystal clear in terms of what the prohibition and the expectation would be.
Yeah, so that's where I was going, because I feel like too, it would add to the city's livability, you know, as far as safety, all of it. The other thing that's in there that we had issues with before that I was gonna ask about is with the storefronts, the sidewalks downtown, how we've had issues with the store owners where people, they've come to work and people have been camping right there. Can we work in some sort of restriction or time restriction that people aren't allowed to camp downtown from the hours of, I don't know, 2 to 5 in the morning, or, you know what I mean? Just those people that are out on the street, so that the police have a, you know, something to be able to get them off there.
Yeah, Mayor, Counselor, so good question. So in those cases, you're talking about public property, and so it's a different analysis. When you start kind of pushing the envelope and getting towards kind of the ability of somebody to be there. So how do you define camping, right? So currently we have a pretty broad definition that may be something we want to look at and tweak a little bit. But really, I guess what I would recommend at this point is not to touch the prohibition on the public property. Let's see if certiorari is granted and see if we get a Supreme Court review. Because however that comes out could definitely impact the enforceability of anything more we might do with regards to public property. So what I would say is currently, they're not allowed to camp there now. But if they're hanging out during the day, if they're quote unquote loitering, those kind of status crimes are much more problematic. And I'm not suggesting that we really approach that with any ordinance change at this point in time.
Councilor Cameron.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Eric. I'm glad everyone's reading the memo, not only because you took so much time putting it together, but I've been learning a lot as you've gotten involved with the homelessness task force and other areas. I've learned a lot and really find your memos helpful for any of the publishers that are thinking of writing stories, or for any people in the community that are really curious about this issue. I'd encourage you to read Eric's memo on this and future ones. Certiorari, is that how you say it? Is that what you just? Certiorari. Thank you. I thought the memo was super helpful in that regard. In regards to this writ of certiorari making its way to the Supreme Court may overrule everything, but I think your memo outlines the nuances involved with trying to craft very surgical ordinances in this regard. The Ninth Circuit, which is kind of further west from us, you referenced the Martin versus Boise case, and that was 12 years of litigation that the city of Boise was involved with because their ordinances were seen as criminalizing homelessness. And the Ninth Circuit Court came back and essentially said, you are violating people's constitutional rights. The 10th Circuit is different and doesn't sound like we have binding precedent in the 10th Circuit, but I guess I don't have a point to that. I found your memo on this issue and other issues on this topic very helpful. And so I would just encourage people, if this is an issue that you're very interested in or have concerns about one way or another, to read these memos, because I think you do a good job highlighting the nuances that, we have to be very careful about the way that we craft these ordinances, about the way we enforce these ordinances. And I think you do a good job illustrating, providing some background why that's the case. Just thank you. Appreciate the research.
Councilor Haskins.
So in regards to campers on your personal property, I live in an HOA that follows city ordinance, and I have a very neighborly neighbor. So I can tell you it's 7 calendar days per month that your vehicle or your camper can be parked on the street. But I actually learned about a permit that the city offers because I heard about it on the radio when they were talking about, it would be so much cheaper over the summer to have your family just stay in your camper on your property. So apparently we can do that, and the permit's only like $250, but the cops do come ask your neighbors. So there's a little bit of perk into that one, but we are going to have to be just a little bit careful with the fact that we do already have some of those things in place. And my neighborly neighbors not so much gonna do that just because I'm a great neighbor. It's a pretty yard and such, so yeah, we can't count on that. But I did want to ask you in regards to the Martin and the religious beds. How is that going to affect us if we put this in place and we are trying to actually put this ordinance to be something we use?
Mayor, Councilor Haskins, so with regard to those cases, that would really apply to our enforcement of the prohibition of camping on public property. I'm not convinced that that really applies to private property. Different analysis, different set of rights. But I think it's something we need to be cognizant of as we look to enforce that prohibition on public property. That's the only binding precedent. Well, it's not really binding, but it's in the Ninth Circuit at least. They're looking to the number of available beds. And if you use that test, and when we look, and we've looked at this in our homelessness task force and the SIM task force, there's really an open question as to how many of those beds we currently have, because certainly the mission has different types of beds. They've got their mercy care beds versus their programmatic beds. And there's more nuance to this even than just religious affiliation. They talk about them being low hurdle beds. And so some, for instance, have shelters that say you can be intoxicated, you can still come and stay here. I'm not sure that we have any of those beds here in Casper. So I think we need to be cognizant of it. I don't know that it should affect the decisions that we're asking council to give direction on today. And I think we need to keep an eye on that litigation as it progresses, if it does go to the Supreme Court, because there certainly is a different vein of jurisprudence that would say that they disagree with that analysis, that it's not a violation of the Eighth Amendment. But I think the jury's still out on it. So I know that's a long kind of rambling answer. Hopefully I answered your question.
Councilor Cassie.
I had two things. First of all, what we may look at, because I know Forest Service and BLM both and national parks all have a restriction on how close you can camp to rivers and streams. And I think that would be a very good guideline for what we would want to use for our camping ordinance, because then that falls in line basically with the national precedent that has been set. The other thing I wanted to ask is, what do you consider your utility easement? Is that public property or is that private property?
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess it depends how the easement's written. I'll dodge it like a true attorney.
I'm guessing that, like, several of us here have a utility easement that runs across the front of our property. The gas line is, the power line may be, the broadband is there. So can somebody theoretically come and claim that's public property and then fall under the public property camping, or?
I would argue no. I think,
but I'm throwing this out as something that I think we ought to consider and have lined out in our ordinance that this applies to or not to. And
there certainly are going to be a whole spectrum of nuances, and I don't think that we'll ever be able to draft an ordinance that will speak to every permutation possible. However, owning property that's subject to a Rocky Mountain Power, easement with a box in the back, I've looked at it, and it's available for them to access it, to repair it, or maintain it. It doesn't give the public that broad right. And the nice thing is when you run into those types of situations where there may be some question, is it public, is it private? Well, that's what we have the courts for. And so we go in front of the judge.
I don't want to have to go to court because somebody's camping on the city easement in my front yard.
But it would be a municipal court, citation, and so it wouldn't be a district court. So anyway, we certainly can try to address, situations, but I think that the more direct we can be in the drafting, the easier it will be to enforce.
Councilor Bond.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo the appreciation for the city attorney's memo, and is very informative and and very helpful. I would support everything that we've talked about in terms of kind of shortening up the timeline on citations and warnings on private and public property. I agree with the idea of kind of holding back on the vehicle restrictions. And I'm on board with the camping in the defined riparian river zone areas. That all makes sense. Just one thing that did kind of catch my interest in the memo, the attorney talked about the idea of that before a citation or arrest can be made, certain steps must be taken, such as issuing an oral and written warning and inquiry into the need for social services must be made. I'm just wondering if that is actually in the language of their city ordinance. Was that when warnings, either citations or arrests, are made, that the police, I'm assuming, would need to inquire into the need for social services?
Mayor, Councilor Bond, so again, that was unique to Denver in that they had a consent decree. And so to take it even a step further, the city of Denver is required to provide certain public spaces for folks to camp. They have to come out, I think, weekly and do a cleanup. They have to do social service sweeps. It's all as part of the consent decree in some litigation. I guess my point in bringing that up was to say that there is a spectrum of options that we can utilize, everything from citing them immediately to giving them a time period to leave and abate. I mean, whatever the appetite of council would be in terms of that enforcement.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I just wanted to say I would support an approach like that. That seems like it makes sense, particularly for folks that are, maybe chronic or, it just seems like it makes sense to kind of inquire. And I realize it's part of the consent decree, but I think in terms of the required steps for enforcement, that makes sense to kind of either at least make the inquiry, is some kind of social service needed.
Councilor Pollack.
Thank you. Just to take the conversation about the interplay between how we deal with this on private property versus how we deal with it on public property one step forward. Have we considered any potential impact around, should we, try to address camping on private property this way, if that will force more people into the public sphere, and what unintended impact to what we're seeing already as it is, already issues in public spaces, what this impact could be.
Mayor, Councilor Pollack, yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I think we've seen some of that here recently as we've gone to clean properties up. We've seen people that are now displaced from where they have been illegally squatting. I think we've seen that with the construction that Whiteout is doing on the bridges. I mean, there have been some camps under there. Those places are no longer available. So I think it's fair to say that you may see folks out in the community. I think that what gives me comfort, both personally and from a legal standpoint, is that there is a segment of the community that is working to get these people services, to provide places for them to gain residents, if you will. So again, I think that's where we work hand in glove with the social services aspect. I think that helps us legally too, because I think it is completely reasonable if folks are pushed off of private property, that they might be in the public sphere, and then we may have more interaction with them. And so if there is an availability of services and so forth, it's going to help us should there be any legal challenge to it. And I don't have specific numbers, somewhat anecdotal, but yeah, I think that's something we'll have to monitor.
Well, and I guess I'll take my crack at it. And I come from a little different perspective, only because I've been to those I've attended a homeless coalition meeting. I understand what we're trying to do. For the public, we have 200 homeless in our community right now. What I don't understand is why the hell any one of them would want to be homeless in Casper, Wyoming, where we have winter 6 months out of the year. It literally doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'd be the first one hopping a train and heading somewhere warm. But that's me if I was in that situation. So I don't understand it. But what I do know is we as a council, we have not only a responsibility to the people that live here and pay taxes here to protect them, but we also have a responsibility to those homeless people. And by putting these rules in place and making it, in a way, I look at it as we're almost protecting them from the elements by forcing them to either get in the shelter and adhere to the rules, because our shelter is set up for those that are willing to do the programming to become productive people. And they've showed it, they've done it. Where we're having the issue is with the ones that don't want to follow societal rules or have such mental illness that they can't overcome these things. Those are the ones that are creating the heartache on our community. And we have got to be able to deal with those. And our police department has got to be able to deal with them. We're not going to arrest our way out of the problem, certainly, but we've got to start somewhere, and we've got to do something about these real problem children that we have, is what I'll call them. So I like where we're going with this. I do worry about, the vehicle. I understand Councillor Pollack's point. I get it, but we have to look at this as if they're parked in front of your house. What does that look like when you have a homeless family living in their car in front of your driveway, in front of your sidewalk? So we have to be cognizant and think about our neighbors who are having to deal with this stuff on a daily basis. So I think there does have to be some language as far as where those cars are allowed to be. I don't want to take their last piece of shelter from them, but I also don't want them in front of my house. I don't want my kids dealing with it. So I don't know what that looks like, but I think we have to have something. Go ahead.
So just as a comment, I have personally moved a lot of families from California and the West Coast. And predominantly, the one thing that they said that they were moving here was because they felt unsafe from where they came from. And one of the biggest reasons was that camping was allowed in subdivisions and in front of their homes. And so what was happening is, and the stories that they will tell you, just, it kept me up for days. But, they were doing all kinds of things, not only to themselves, but to the people living there. So the people in those homes end up becoming trapped into their homes, because if they came out, they got attacked and they feared for their lives. The police wouldn't help them. And so you literally had blocks and blocks of subdivisions to where people couldn't get in and out of their homes, or they couldn't go home. And so I don't believe we're going to get to that, but it scares me that we may even have the potential of that even happening. Is that we should have the ability to live in our homes and feel safe in our homes. And so that's kind of the thing, is just listening to all these stories from everybody moving here and why they moved here. They moved here because they felt safer here. And that is the number one reason. And that's what we need to do for our citizens, is to provide them safety, and so that they can feel like they can go to work and go shopping and have a home and not be afraid to just step outside.
Well, to your point, when you say we don't want that stuff to happen here, I can tell you it's already here.
I know.
I literally walked through a $10 million building that has been destroyed and degraded by homeless squatters. It is ruined. And now who knows what's going to happen with that building. We've condemned it, and I believe there may be a buyer, but now there's asbestos issues, there's this, there's that, but there's been so much damage to that building. You would never believe that happened in our town. It's unbelievable what they've done. So, and that's not the only case. We've also got some private homes that the same thing has happened to. And so we've got to get a grip on it. and try to curtail that type of behavior in our community, for the protection of us and them both. So, but our police have got to have the teeth, the wherewithal, the ability to be able to deal with that type of situation better. And so I think that's what we're being taxed with. It sounds like, Eric, I think you put together something very eloquent that I think is a start. I think we may, like Councillor Pollock said, let's see what that does for us. You know, if it helps us start tighten up and clean up some of these things, and we may, us or a future council may have to come back and revisit this at some point. If the chief brings us new factual data that says, you know, we're almost there, but this would really push us over the hump or whatever. But I think this is a good start. And so with that said, and I think everybody's had a crack at it, I would ask for a direction or move to allow us to move this forward into a 3 reading ordinance so that we can get started on this process. Sir.
And Mr. Mayor, I agree with the direction we're going, and it sounds like, just to be clear, that the private property piece as well as the river protection zone are the 2 pieces that you'd like some draft language on. Is that fair?
Is that fair? Yes.
I would like to see them go ahead and address the public as well.
Eric's
Well,
recommending against that.
He
Do what?
Eric's recommending against that until there's further.
Mr. Mayor, we've already got an ordinance that prohibits.
Yeah, because now we're waiting on some SCOTUS stuff, I
Okay.
think, before we can proceed any further down
Basically
that.
waiting on the Grants pass issue. Yeah, okay.
So with that and the thumbs up, I think we have our direction, if we may. And before we move on to our next item, I want to go back to our previous item because there was direction requested there. And I skimmed right over that, and I'm not sure what that direction was. Is it more me having the ability to go speak on behalf of the council and our constituents in the same manner that I did tonight and do some more information gathering? Or do we, I'm going to go anyway on behalf of our constituents. So I guess I'd like to be able to provide the same comments I did tonight. But I think the truth is we're going to have to wait until the Public Service Commission. And I noticed today the governor has put out an inquiry as to this rate hike as well. And so there's going to be an investigation legislatively at some point as well. So I don't think I think we're just at the start of this. I don't think we've heard the last of this rate hike.
Mr. Mayor, Council, so I did provide some information for all of you on that point. I think the direction requested, Mayor, is exactly that. How does council wish to address the Public Service Commission on Thursday at the town hall? I certainly jotted some additional notes down. I can certainly give you some additional thoughts that I had. I just very briefly, it was very interesting that you know, you've got the ECAM that they're asking for a hike to recapture, but then their forward-looking projections are sky high, and I think that's where the rubber meets the road. You know, if they hike them way up, then are they going to be looking to adjust it back down at some point? Why not take a more tiered approach? But that being said, I think the direction is how does council want to attend Thursday?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, if we address them with those facts, to say this is what it is, those solid numbers to be able to come across, whoever it is, whether it's the mayor, whoever, come across and say, this is what we have. We've drawn our conclusion to exactly what you just said, that it's done pragmatically with the approach of saying, you know, this is what it is. And I think we can make our point across that, you know, is this really necessary? This big of a rate hike? The hike is going to come. The question is whether we want it to be 21%.
And Mayor and Vice Mayor, I think that's correct. I think when you look at the filings, most of it's done confidentiality and under seal. There is pre-filing testimony, that's correct. A lot of the statistics and data are not public. There are a number of interveners, including a state agency that advocates on behalf of consumers, and then there's an industry group, so they have access to that. I think that from the city standpoint is we need to really urge the Public Service Commission to hold their feet to the fire and justify everything that they're requesting and see where it lands. I mean, we're not a party, but I think we certainly can come and advocate on behalf
We,
of our city.
we can advocate on behalf of 70,000 people strong, certainly. Well, if the council's all right with it, then I'll get with you, tomorrow or Thursday morning, and I will present that to the Public Service Commission on behalf of our council. Is everybody okay with that? Go ahead.
Just one caveat, I would like to see us avoid invoking EPA or other regulations as the cause of this. I think that's a
Oh, no,
oversimplification and of the issue. So I'd just like to steer clear of that.
fair enough.
Mr.
Sure.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
get with me after the meeting and I'll find out where you would like it sent. But I've got, and I get it weekly, but it is the NYMEX and CIG gas prices on average prices on a monthly basis, starting back in 2012 up till now.
That'd be great.
So
If you could email that to me and then I can get with Eric and we'll find.
do you want it on your city
Yeah.
email or do you? Okay,
Yep, and then
that's what I wanted to find out.
everybody okay with that then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's what I was quoting from when
I saw one thing. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I'll arrange with your office for an hour for United.
Bruce,
Sir.
also add to that, I don't know if we have information readily available, but I spoke to their projected, increases based on average kilowatt hours and average home. I wonder if we have more localized statistics that are readily available. I don't want city staff spending hours to pour over this, but if through our building department or something, we're able to pull some of these more local numbers, I worry, Dave mentioned tonight that they use the median, and, I just wonder, is that because that's a lot more convenient figure for them than the mean? There's different averages you can pull, and so when I hear that they're using the median, I wonder what the mean looks like. So if there's anything we can provide in the way of localized data, what we would expect our constituents to see as an increase, some of the feedback we got from one constituent, the research they did was that the average residential space was 1,000 square feet, or people used 1,000 megawatts per hour, and it was 2,000 square feet for the average home size, and that drastically changes at $16.42. That increases that up to around $40. And so I don't have the time, otherwise I'd bring that research to council myself, but $16 and $40, that's a pretty wide chasm. And so if there's anything we can help to put a better estimate of what those numbers are, that I would love to see that in our letter, if it's realistic.
Fair enough. Well, I found it rather astounding that we only used 300 out of 12,000, with 70,000 people strong. That's, we're just a very minute amount of the electricity that they're pouring out on a daily basis, but we're being asked to shoulder a brunt of the load, and that's where the issue is coming in, I think. And so all we could do is ask the PSC to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that everything's justified to the T. But I think with the governor involved now and these town halls that they're having, I don't think you're going to see anywhere near an increase like that. But I'm not a predictor either, so I guess we'll see. Okay, let's move on to snow disposal, storage, snow route discussion, and the naming of snow plows. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. We appreciate the opportunity to go over this discussion, and frankly, it's a really appropriate time to be having this as we are, gearing up and we're entering into snow season here soon. Hopefully.
Bite your tongue, sir.
I know, hopefully it's later than sooner, but you know how that goes around here. We've essentially got 3 items we want to talk to you about. First of all, more of a follow-up as it relates to snow routes and the methodology we follow. We're prepared to kind of go over that with you tonight and take any feedback or questions that you might have on that. We also have an ordinance recommendation that we would like to go over with you as well, in addition to the route discussion. And then finally, we wanted to cover any follow-up that you might have pertaining to a potential naming program that if you have direction on, we'd be happy to take it and move forward there.
If I remember correctly, that was Councilor Engelbretson brought up that part of it, so she'll probably have some ideas there. But we'll start with the disposal, storage, snow route discussion, and I believe that was something that you had asked for. So maybe you can kind of let the city manager know what you were thinking or what information you're looking for?
My biggie was, we spend a ton of money hauling snow. And why don't we plow it to the sides? I understand we don't plow it to the sides because they're worried about the degradation of the curb and the asphalt, and primarily that seam along the curb gutter to the asphalt, with it sitting there freeze thaw into the crack, splitting it out and degrading it. I guess my question then comes is, okay, that will probably happen. We see it where the asphalt even comes together out in the middle of the road where they've laid two different courses of asphalt. My question is, which is the more costly, to repair some of the curb gutter damage or to keep hauling the snow? And that's really becomes then the cost benefit of which way we should be going. And I understand that there's both sides of it, but if we properly seal the seam between the curb gutter and the asphalt, then how much does that really bother versus like we do out on our asphalt streets? We'll go out and they'll grind through them, they blow it all out, they fill it back up with the tar and try to seal it up. So if we're doing that along the curb gutter, then where is our most cost effective?
The problem
idea?
is, Steve, that's not the only issue with putting snow on the sides. Number one, you're losing all the parking on the street. There's no place to park. Hold on. That's one. Number two, we're blocking driveways that people have cleared because you cannot plow down 12th or 13th Street and not plug every driveway. That would be impossible. You're also going to plug your storm drains. So during the thaw time, when everything gathers in that snow, all the branches, all the dirt and everything else, now you have storm water grate unplugging to do, which is extremely costly. And then, like you said, you have the splitting. So there's four main reasons why we don't plow to the sides. And those are unfortunately very strong reasoning, considering putting a windrow in the middle there's literally we don't have to deal with any of those implications.
We still deal with the plug gutters. You go to the corner of 15th, 24, whatever you want to call it, where the Midi Mart, the new La Costa, you go to that intersection in the winter and there is a constant ice, mud, snow hole as you cross from Outer Drive onto Centennial Hills, whatever it is, because that drain is plugged. That's number one. Number two, there are people all across the country that have to plow out their driveways after the snowplow comes. That is nothing more than the citizens of this city have been spoiled by not having to shovel their driveways.
Where do they put it?
Huh?
Where do they put it?
What do you mean, where do they put it?
If the snow plows come down the road and we put everything on the side of the road and we block their driveway where they can't get out, where do they put it?
They put it into their yard, off to the sides, onto the parkways.
That's
I
a
did
lot of
that for
snow.
years when I was a kid.
Mr. Mayor, can we hear from Cindy and
But
the,
I would
and the
just as
city
soon hear from
staff
Chad
that deal
and
with this on a day-to-day
Sure.
basis? And what the numbers are. Well, let's find out what the numbers are.
It's a good point.
I think we can argue philosophical issues, but I want to hear the real numbers.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Yep.
Yep.
Your Honor, Counselors. Thank you, Mayor. You did address some of the primary reasons we actually plowed to the center. The one that always comes to my mind first is when you throw snow onto people's cars and block their driveways, we become a really bad agency. And I mean, our phones in streets get the most phone calls during snow seasons, even without that. So I'm old enough that I remember when those kind of complaints come in about throwing snow onto parked vehicles. So thank you for addressing that. And to address Councilor Kathy's question about cost effectiveness, to be honest, I don't know that we've ever really done a cost-effective analysis regarding damage, to gutters. That, versus falling to the center versus throwing off. I mean, obviously, if you directed us to do that and look at that, we would. Personally, I think the city streets department has one of the best snow plowing operations I've ever seen. I travel a lot and I lived in Denver for 12 years and we are so much better than they are. And when I lived there, they plowed it to the side. And boy, the community was never happy with that. So I'm not saying we're not perfect, but I think we do a really good job. And I don't disagree with you. Nothing ever is perfect in operations. There is a memo in there and I won't take credit for writing it. Mr. Roger Shad, who leads the streets division, wrote that memo 2 years ago, with Andrew Beamer, when you all asked for an update just on how we operate with our snow plowing operations. So, Shad, would you like to add to any of that?
I'll entertain any questions.
Okay, so feel free to ask us questions about that. Council.
Vice Mayor.
Shad, do you know how many years we've been windrowing here in Casper?
I've been here for over 30, so it's been at least that many.
So it's been quite a while
Quite a
since we've
while.
been doing it.
When I was a kid, we did it then, or saw it being done then as well.
Okay. I know this is a hypothetical. I mean, if we just started to plow to the sides, we just kind of abruptly said, okay, we're gonna start doing this. We don't know. We just make the decision, not based upon the numbers, really those things. What kind of pushback do you think you get from the,
100%.
quite a bit from the community? And recommendations from you guys, from the city staff?
We've done a due diligence over the years and trying to protect the, we understand we're not gonna make everybody happy. And of course, depending on what Mother Nature wants to throw at us, I think the guys that we have out there doing it are very receptive to people's needs when they're calling in. We can't be everywhere all the time, but I think for the most part, I think, as Cindy alluded to, I think I will go a little bit for the guys that work for me. I think they do an awesome job.
I think that's all.
And to add to that, just with my engineering hat, I would never recommend you change a major policy like that without it being driven by some sort of data.
Yeah.
Like you said, doing some sort of cost analysis and showing that this is gonna be a significant improvement to our community and the reasons why.
Well, and with that said, I would even be opposed to entertaining a study like that. We've been doing it for 30 years and it works well. Why would we?
Don't disagree with you. But I understand.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why there's 9 of us and we get to throw these ideas around and I appreciate that. But doesn't always mean they're good, doesn't always mean they're best. Go ahead.
But I think if there was a problem and it was an issue that was coming up from the streets, I think it would be communicated to Carter to say, hey, look, we're spilling money into these, trying to fix the streets by plowing and doing that. And that's never been communicated. In all the years I've been on council, we've never come across that and had that conversation. It's always been done, very thoughtfully, and I think it's being done well. And you're never gonna have a perfect street, obviously, after plowing, all those years, or all those, months. But to me, I think we're on the right track, and you guys are the professionals, and you guys know what you're doing. So,
Counselor.
Do you happen to have, I don't want to entertain a full blown analysis of this either necessarily, but do you happen to have just anecdotally what percentage of the total hours spent snow plowing are spent cleaning up the windrows versus clearing the actual streets?
Again, that depends on what Mother Nature throws at us, of course. Like, we get something typical like in our early fall. I mean, it's entertained springtime because those just killed us lately. But
Yep.
I mean, within a week's period, I mean, the town's back running. We may have a morning or an evening, depending on what time that snowstorm starts. But our goal is buses get to school without issues. People get to work without issues. I think, I'm gonna say, depending on what Mother Nature does, I think I want to put a specific timeline on what's gonna happen, because I don't know about nature, but let's say on a typical snowstorm, or in a week's period of time, we're wrapping things up, either we have warmth in the street, warmth in the air still, depending what time of year it is, so we have abilities to let Mother Nature help melt some of the snow. We have our abilities to get our downtown picked up, so we can come in and out, have our school picked up, so parents can get their kids to school, walk across crosswalks. I appreciate the wanting to know a percentage, but I don't know if I can give you a real.
Follow-up.
Sure.
Can you quantify at all just the clearing of the windrow element of that? We would still have the street clearing element of it regardless, right? Is that 20% of the process? Is it 50% of the process to deal with the windrow once the streets have been cleared?
Once it's plowed, it put it
Yes.
in the middle. 50%, take 50% plow it up, 50% to get rid of it.
But the truth is, it's a hell of a lot easier to pick it up in the middle than if you had shoved it to the side and you have to clean both sides, right?
We have the risk of-
Because it still has to be picked up.
No. Plow it to the side, you don't pick it up.
Is that true?
That is true. When, in Denver, they never picked up snow. They just threw it to the side and wherever it landed, it was up to those.
Well, last year's record snowfall, I can't imagine how that would have been. There'd have been 12-foot drifts on the side of the road,
Had deck down driving lanes.
right? Huh.
Yeah, of course, we can put it to the side and anytime we want, but is it gonna be feasible for only the residents, but for ourselves to try to keep the roads clear?
Well, and if you follow the Farmer's Almanac the way I do, we're gonna have a hell of a winter again, it sounds like, so.
Prepping.
Huh?
We're prepping.
I imagine so.
And
Go ahead.
one thing, don't get me wrong, you guys do a great job of what you do. Okay? I am perfectly happy with the job you folks do. My whole deal is trying to save money, because we're sitting here trying to get make the 5th cent permanent, so we have money. We're looking at other things, and that was the whole point of what I was bringing up, was the money issue of it. You guys do a wonderful job of keeping our streets open in the winter and keeping traffic moving. I want to commend you on that. So I don't want you to think that this was, oh, you're doing a terrible job of plowing. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, that said, let me ask you.
Take it that way. I don't.
Well, I just wanted to make sure everybody in streets and everywhere understood that that was where I was coming.
So with that said, Chad, with your expertise being the head of that department, do you think it would save you $1 to plow to the sides as opposed to windrowing and picking it up?
Well, again, it depends on how much snow level we're talking about, in our ordinance or in our plow manual, if it's 4 inches or below through a certain time frame throughout the year, we do put it to the side. So we don't have to pick it up, but we also have Mother Nature working with us. We have the ability of just what's going on to help melt that, so we don't have to put it in the middle. Now, once it gets to that threshold, when it goes up above that 4 inches, that's our factor of, okay, we don't want to inhabit other private property. We don't want to damage private property. We're throwing snow boulders. Boston knows how big they get. They'll smash a car door, nothing flat. So that's why we have those parameters in our rules and regs for plowing snow, is when it gets to a certain level, we start putting it in the middle.
So the short answer is you're doing it in the most proficient, cheapest way possible, like windrowing.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I would add to that, it would actually save you money, the city, if we just threw it no matter what the circumstances on the side. Obviously, because we wouldn't be out there doing the snow pickup. However, we would pay indirectly an amount I can't even imagine or wouldn't want to imagine. So that's the only thing I clarified.
Property destruction is what you're saying?
Yeah, and complaints about not being able to get around because you're putting it into the driveway. So to Councilor Kathy's point, Mayor, I'm data driven. And if I thought there was something we could be doing or researched it that we could be doing better to save money, we want you to tell us to go look at those things and try to figure out how we can save money, because we are all about saving money. This guy right here. I've been doing this job for a very little time. He has already talked to me about ways to maybe save money because we know it's a tight ship and we know the situation that we're in as an organization. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you, Mayor. It's not that I don't think this is a worthwhile discussion, but it sounds like we were needing to figure out a few different things. That snow disposal and storage, discussion about our snow routes and naming our snow plows. And so I guess in the interest of keeping with our agenda and making good use of everyone's time, I guess I would just ask that we, focus on a couple of things at the memo. The memos were created, and to that point, I would be, I have my own thoughts on as far as snow disposal and storage and what's responsible, what's proper etiquette for disposing of snow around your property. I was curious, though, if you could speak, one or both of you, to the 3 proposed ordinances in our memo as far as potential ordinance changes for snow disposal and storage. Does city staff, it doesn't look like there's a recommendation from city staff on any of those 3 ordinances. And so I would just, before I give my own 2 cents, I'd be curious what y'all's thoughts are on the couple of proposed ordinance changes.
Your Honor, counselors, when we did review the code, there is nothing in our municipal code that addresses the proper manner to remove snow. There's nothing in there. There's one which is attached for your reference on obstructing sidewalks. That particular ordinance does not mention snow. It mentions ice. So staff thought it would be very helpful for you to consider directing Carter to have us update that to include snow and city streets and public access. In addition to that, we were thinking there was 2 other things we'd really like to see in a dedicated proper snow removal section is prohibiting the activities we don't want to see and defining the proper activities. Improper, it's like it's prohibited for you to throw snow from your property onto a sidewalk, onto a street, or onto a public access or your neighbor's property in any way. And the proper thing to do is to place it on your own property and do it in a way that there's no safety hazard. It's not limiting your sight view, and that it the other things we discussed. So not limiting sight view, not placing on sidewalks so people can side. Oh, and what you mentioned too is that you store it in a way that minimizes erosion onto other people's property. So those were the 3 things we wanted you to consider to direct. Of course, there's always the option that they didn't include that we can do nothing. So it's whatever you would like to direct Carter to have us do.
Counselor?
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy, for that. I'm glad that this is being brought up as a topic. The first 2 winters I've been on council, I think I've gone through 2 winters now. I've talked to people, especially people that have moved from other areas, about the ordinance not including snow. I think it's strange that it includes ice, water, and pretty much everything else but snow. So I do think that's a worthwhile conversation. I've thought about it the past couple winters as people have brought this up to me. Going back to kind of the homelessness chat or the feeding of animals ordinance, I would like there to be outs for people. I know there's elderly people with medical conditions and stuff, and it's just difficult. They either can't afford to pay somebody to come do it, or they are not physically able to do it themselves. So I do want there to be some sort of due process, some sort of appeals process for folks that have kind of these extenuating circumstances. But I would like to see snow included in our ordinance as far as like obstructing of the sidewalks. I know our mail carriers would certainly probably appreciate it because they're always having to trudge through people's sidewalks when it's 2 feet deep. But I do want there to be some leniency in that. This historic snowstorm we had this spring, I take this really seriously. I try to be the good neighbor. I try to keep my sidewalks clear, but holy crap, this last snowstorm, it was like, I was spending hours out there a couple days in a row and I could not keep my sidewalks cleared. And I live in a very windy area of town, so it feels like the second I get it off the sidewalk, the wind's just putting it right back. So, I do think there should be some flexibility, but I would like to see snow included, and I know there's lots of other people in our community that would like to be, see snow included, and I have also complained, I think, every winter season about seeing people plowing their, using their snow blower and putting it right in the middle of CY Avenue. I would like to see an ordinance restricting that behavior and, having some sort of consequence, because we already get feedback that we're not plowing enough streets, or we're not plowing streets fast enough. Thank you, Shad, for going to bat for your department. I do think we have a really good department that does a really good job. I appreciate the memo, including the fact that it sounds like we have 13 tandem axle dump trucks with salters and plowers, 2 graders and 1 loader with a plow when necessary. So we have a lot of equipment, and when the weather necessitates it, we have employees staffing all of that equipment in 12 hour shifts if it takes it. And so we have a lot of equipment, and we're staffing it 24/7 when it necessitates it. And still, it's hard for us to keep up at times. We don't need people undermining the good work that our snowplow drivers are doing by filling the streets back up because they, for one reason or another, don't want to put it in their yard. They want to put it in the middle of the street. So it doesn't. You haven't strongly recommended. It doesn't sound like. It sounds like you've identified areas where there's a potential for us to discuss it. But I'll throw that out there. I would like to see snow included in the obstruction ordinance. I would like to see some sort of ordinance regulating people putting snow into the street or other public right of ways. And, I guess the line of sight one, I don't know what the impetus is for, I don't know what you guys are seeing on a day-to-day basis as far as that's concerned, but I think we should discuss that as well.
Mayor, Councilor.
Sure.
Just a little bit. The big driver part for me was the commercial part of the commercial people going out there pushing snow and up some of our bigger business parking lots into the roadways. It's shrinking our driving lanes down. So we have a route we follow. We don't get back there until 3 or 4 hours. Now these guys pushed all their snow from their big parking lots, restricting driving lanes. So it's more of the commercial part that I was driven on versus more of the residential.
I think your line of sight was too, you didn't want them piling it all up on the corner, so when somebody comes up, they can't see a car coming, so go ahead.
Okay.
What?
Just a couple of things, but, so the main problem is the commercial, like you were just saying, and how they're doing that. Can we just do a snow etiquette PSA and send it out there and send these businesses who are obviously violators of it as a reminder and assess a fine if they're not going to listen to it? Is it right? So in order to do that, what would be that's what I was wondering, what's the good wordage to put that in there so that they can, Mr. Attorney, do you have something precise that can narrow that out?
Well, it has to be for residential as well, because we have people that push it right out of their driveway out in the street after they came by and plowed.
Shoveling when they shoved it to the side, not here, different state, but it's hard. And
So Mayor,
Yeah.
Counselor, I certainly could work with staff, that's the direction of council, to come up with some appropriate, verbiage that would address the issue that's identified. I don't have any stock language tonight, but.
I will say that solid waste has non-compliant escalating fees that the council many years ago helped me because we were having a significant problem with improperly putting your trash in your container. And amazingly enough, most people, if they know what's expected and the right behavior, they will do it. So we never meant to imply here that we would increase staff and be inspectors and going out and looking for problems. We do it only based on complaints. And if we get a complaint, that's the first thing we do, educate. Once we educate a business or a resident, they usually change their behavior. And if they don't, then we can use escalating fees. And in my experience in solid waste with those, I can remember one individual that we had to get to the $100, which is the worst fee. So one, out of our 50,000 people is really insignificant. So the ordinance just helps have the teeth to actually go out and do that. As far as a campaign, I mean, we can do a campaign without ordinances, but to actually
educate.
Yes, we can do all kinds of educational programs. without an ordinance. But an ordinance really helps for that small part of the population who don't respond to educational opportunities and knowing the right thing. It's really helpful.
Go ahead.
Well, when we need the snowplows, they will.
Segue.
Is that a segue into the
Well,
next topic?
we're almost there, but I'm a little confused. I thought it was against the law in the city of Casper to not have your sidewalk shoveled within 48 hours. That's not true.
No,
There's nothing on it.
We certainly need to do that. I mean, like you said, for our mail carriers and well, just everybody, but our elderly, our handicapped, those sidewalks have got to be cleared.
no.
Yes, they do.
I think you're gonna run into those.
Well, I don't know. I know in Lander, they have a 48-hour deal. If it's not cleared within 48 hours, they come and do it and then they tack it onto your bill. So go ahead.
Cindy, there is an obligation though, property owners adjacent to bus stops, there's some sort of expectation of them clearing around the bus stop, isn't there? No, there's not?
Look at Liz.
Our drivers are doing that now in parks system. We're gonna have a campaign. It's,
So even our commercial businesses downtown, they don't have to shovel their sidewalks or
oh, the commercial ones.
they do?
Bus stops, no commercial businesses downtown.
That just seems like such a common courtesy. And I think we could, Eric, you can, or Mr. Attorney, you can tell me if it would be inappropriate of us, like Ray said, or the vice mayor, excuse me, call me whatever you want. Raymond, he said, there are probably people out there that can't afford to do it. But I'm wondering if we couldn't put something in there where if they don't within so much time, and the city has to come out and do that they're charged for that, or almost like we do with our weeds and our grass. And, I mean, we got to start somewhere. We're going to need some teeth.
Yeah, we can certainly look into options on how to address that. Try to come up with something that would be, administratable. Sure.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I will tell you right now that I will vote against an ordinance that forces people to shovel their sidewalks. You have the snowbirds that are out of town. You have the people with health issues. You have the people with age issues. And to then have them have to turn around and go down and apply for some kind of a permit to not have to shovel their sidewalk or force them to pay somebody is wrong.
Okay, so I understand that, but what do we do about those same elderly people and our mail carriers and our people in wheelchairs and our handicapped that can't traverse down a sidewalk because somebody hasn't shoveled it or cleaned it? I'm just looking from the other side.
Then get a ride or talk to somebody about trying to get around. And the mail carriers,
Hang on.
my mail carrier drives to my mailbox. He takes 2 steps and stuffs it in, gets back in his truck and drives off.
Well, that's not the way they do it in my neighborhood. He covers about
I'm
30
just saying,
houses on foot.
but here again,
Go ahead,
that gets into another soapbox.
Councilor Pollak.
I have the same concerns about folks who struggle to do it. I lived next to an elderly person for a number of years who had the corner lot. I, specifically bought a house with a very small frontage so I would make my life easier, and then ended up doing the whole corner as well many, many times, because I knew that she wouldn't be able to do it. But on the same token, we expect those same people to maintain their lawns and their weeds, which is also difficult to do and costly to do. And we don't have a great mechanism to help with that. We had a constituent bring one to us the other day, which I think is a viable idea to try to develop an option for folks who can't do it. But I think ultimately, people have a right to be able to traverse the sidewalk safely. So it's difficult, and I don't know. I do think the ordinance should exist, and I think we need a plan for many folks who cannot get it done because it is physically very taxing, particularly when it's like last winter was, which was, I was sore for days shoveling. So I don't know what the answer to that element is, but I don't think it's acceptable to just, say that there's no responsibility to give people access to a public right of way.
Agreed.
just like snow etiquette. And that's exactly what Amber was just explaining. And that's what it is. You shovel your sidewalks. The mail people don't have to deliver if your sidewalk's not shoveled. But there's many people in the neighborhoods, especially when we live downtown, Ward 1 area, where people walk regardless of the weather. And they need to do that to get to wherever they're going, because either they choose it for a healthy lifestyle or they just don't have a car or whatever the reason is. But it's etiquette just to have clear pathways for everybody to traverse. Just like she's saying, etiquette.
Counselor?
Shovel your.
So I hear you, I do. However, as a homeowner, you do have responsibilities. Again, we make a mow. And your snowbirds, if they can afford a second home, they can find someone to shovel for them. And for a city that does not pick you up in front of your house and we are making children walk up to a mile to get to a bus stop. I see kids walking down 12th Street in 6 inches or higher of snow or in the street because they don't want to get wet, and there is not an option. The bus is not going to pick them up at my house. They have to walk from Centennial to Verda or Centennial to Kelly Walsh, and that's just one street. So I feel like because we do not offer an option for students, then there should be an expectation that there should be a sidewalk. So either we have to shovel it or they do. That's how I feel about that.
Well, my question would be, if people don't take care of their lawn, which is not even a safety hazard, because we're not walking through their grass. If they don't take care of their lawn, we go mow it and we send them a bill in the city of Casper. Because we don't like to look at tall grass in somebody's yard. But we're not going to have them shovel their walk, which is actually a safety hazard? That makes no sense to me. None. So we either do away with all of it, say it's their property, do what you want with it, let their grass grow 38 feet tall and stay out of their business, or we're going to make them pay to mow, we're going to make them keep their yard where it's aesthetically pleasing to us, then we can damn sure make them shovel their walk where it's a safety hazard and a necessity for male people, children, elderly, wheelchairs, everything else. That's how I feel. So, sir.
So how do we enforce it? I mean, I can go down my street. There's several blocks that aren't shoveled. I mean, how do we enforce it? I mean, you're going to be looking at it. I mean, I guess it would be self-reporting is really what you're looking at. And the heck, if I'm going to report someone, I'll go take my snowblower and do it myself.
I don't think it'd be you reporting them. I think, you know what we should do, honestly, is take this under advisement. And we should probably reach out to those communities that have those ordinances. I know for a fact Lander has it. I know they do. You have to shovel your walk. To be ADA compliant, to be neighborly, to do all those things. We should probably reach out to those communities and ask them how they go about enforcing them and what that looks like. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, having worked in a number of communities where these kinds of ordinances exist, I think you'll find a lot of parallels with regard to how we deal with unkempt yards and so on as well. We don't generally ride around and take a big long list of grass that's beyond, you know, a certain height or whatever. But generally speaking, where we have egregious situations, where we have neighbors that are concerned and let us know, those are the kinds of ways in which we respond and deal with a lot of those issues. And so I wouldn't see this be a whole lot different. We're not going to take the time to go around and make a big long list of sidewalks that are buried and stuff like that. But indeed, where we do have egregious situations, we've got wind prone areas, we've got someone that fell and face down into a drift on a sidewalk and those kinds of things. We do become alerted for that kind of stuff, and we follow up. So I don't think you'll see a lot of difference with respect to the parallels that already exist in our ordinances and what we might be talking about. Now, when it comes to the commercial parking lots and so on, and we've got literally 12-foot snow dunes in a street that obviously came from a commercial lot that's adjacent to there, that poses really significant problems, and we can use that as sort of prima facie evidence to deal with the property that's adjacent and have some conversation. Those things are a lot easier, not difficult to deal with, and not all that complex. So I think we've got a lot of tools at our disposal that we'll be able to deploy without having to bring on a snow police and a sidewalk shoveling militia, if you will, to help us through these issues.
I just think we need to have some teeth. We get a wheelchair stuck, or we have kids that get hit because they're walking in the street because they can't traverse down the sidewalk. We need to be able to go to that homeowner and say, it's a law, that needs to be cleaned. You know, whatever, use it as a teaching tool, if you will. Go ahead.
Well, I think the fact that our ordinance doesn't attend to it at all creates confusion. The number of people who have reached out to me who think that somebody else is responsible for maintenance of the sidewalk is tremendous. It's a lot of folks. I was like, actually, you have to do that. They're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, but then there's really nothing to point to in the ordinance that lays that out, what the expectations are, what constitutes the hazard on the sidewalk and all of those things. And so I think by creating the guidelines, that'll be helpful for me when talking to constituents to say, well, here are the parameters. When we first talked about this, when I first got on council, it was like literally the second meeting, probably the first meeting I ever said anything. I got a headline in Oil City about it. Was basically like, people were like, well, do I have to do it am I supposed to leave work to come do it if the snow is accumulating? So things like that, like how many inches and, in what time frame? So you can say, no, it's, you have 48 hours, or no, it's only if it's over 4 inches that you need to, get out there or whatever. All of those expectations, I think clarity would be a nice thing for constituents to have.
I could tell you just for Eric, when he goes to draft it, the land ordinance I know says they have 48 hours to have it cleared. And traversable, I believe are the words. Go ahead.
Mayor, Council, so just while we're sitting here, I just pulled up this Cheyenne's ordinance, and that they have a provision that snow, ice, or slush is declared a nuisance, and they have a provision that within 24 hours you have to clear the sidewalks, and then it makes it illegal to pile or push snow into public streets in such a manner that it creates a safety hazard, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing. So it's very, very simple. It's treated very similarly to lawns, weeds, those types of things. It's the accumulation of snow and ice is a nuisance. You're required within a certain time period to clear it. So if that is the direction that council wants us to go, I think it would be a pretty easy lift to put something out of it.
Go ahead, Steve. Hang on. Go ahead, Steve.
Two things. Number one, when we get our 6, 8 inches of snow, I cannot keep my sidewalk clear, period, because they don't plow the street. The street snow is higher than my sidewalk. My yard snow is higher than my sidewalk. I plow it and immediately it is blown shut and back 8 inches deep again on my sidewalk. That's number one. Secondly, and I realize we aren't in the ski industry, but basically in the ski industry, you either mark all hazards or you mark none. Because if you post there are hazards, which seeing snow out there, it is a hazard, but you don't mark it and they fall, that's common sense, and you will win a lawsuit. If you start marking and trying to clear and somebody falls, you didn't mark that, you're responsible now and you lose. Right in my neighborhood, I had 2 people wind up in the hospital with surgery on a shoveled sidewalk. I fell on a shoveled sidewalk because you go out and you wind up with a little patch of ice that you can't see and you slip and fall. And 2 of the people was on the same spot. And the second person even helped the first person get off of the sidewalk and back to their house so they could go to the hospital, and turned around and was heading back home and fell on the same darn spot. If there'd have been snow there, neither one of them would have fallen. And both of them were trying to help a neighbor take their trash can back on trash day. I mean, you're opening a can of worms that we shouldn't even be worrying about.
I disagree.
I would just like to say, because 24 or 48 hours can be a little cumbersome when we're given 4 feet of snow, or the wind is blowing it significantly, because you cannot hire enough people to do that. It's going to be, the city won't even be able to accomplish that. So we need to make sure and put some language in there of like a grace period. So if we have feet of snow, that we're not all out there dying trying to shovel our snow. So I just think that we need to have some kind of language in there also. So if it is that much, it's not, we're not all out there trying to do that in 24 hours.
Like common sense.
Okay, so before we belabor this any longer, I'm gonna offer a suggestion or direction. We'll see what the council wants to do with that. We could pick it apart, we could change it, we can do whatever. What I'd like to see is us put that in place, just like we have with our grass and everything else. Give people 48 hours in order to allow clearing for their sidewalks so that our people can traverse around these towns. That's the direction I'm asking for. I would take a thumbs up if you're on board. Otherwise, done. So you'll take care of the legal part of that. You too will. Thank you very much.
Change the ordinance around plowing into the street and all the other elements. we
Yes.
talked about.
Yep. And let me add, we got a thumbs up on that. So let's go back to the other. We would also like to get a thumbs up on, hang on, Brandy, on, on keeping your snow in your own property, not putting it into street or public ways, and the line of sight, as well. Everybody's on board with that?
Randy was too.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, done.
What about the naming of the snowplows?
That's what we're going there next.
Oh, okay.
We're going there next. Mr. Bond, sir?
I just wanted to say, I wonder about, with the ordinance thing about investigate, you mentioned something about investigating what other cities in Wyoming do, how they cover sidewalk snow removal in their city ordinance. Is that something we still need to research a little bit, perhaps?
I don't think so. Eric will just research it for, just for the legal, the precedent and the wording, because Cheyenne's 24-hour, we've just agreed on 48 hours, which I know Lander has as well. So it'll give our constituents a little bit more time. I think we tend to get a little more snow than Cheyenne does. So that'll afford our people, our constituents, more time. So, and I think we're not going to have snow police. I think this is a situation where somebody's going to call somebody in because they fell, or they got stuck in a wheelchair, they can't get through, or the kids are walking in the street, or this is going to be more like like Stephen mentioned, a feeding of the squirrels. Somebody's going to have to call them in before somebody comes out to visit them. We're not going to have people driving around checking sidewalks.
So yeah, I just think that's a thing to research, is the code, how it's enforced, kind of the specific language, in terms of timelines and so forth. I think that's still worth researching, but so.
That is what the attorney will be doing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. Jenna?
I think it's a job for Buzz Ice Clear.
Oh, my gosh.
We transition.
I think you are a parking nerd, actually. Let's move on to, with that little segue, the naming of the snowplows, which was an initial idea brought to us by Councilor Engelbrecht. So if you'd like to give a little background, explain where that came from.
Dump trucks, just the plows.
We have enough plows for the 13 trucks. Do we have backups too?
How many do we have? How many total plows do we have?
13.
15. Right? Yeah, 15.
Plows, trucks.
No, plows.
Plows, just plows.
15.
Only plows. So I guess my thought is just that I had read that there were a couple of states that had done this. And so they had proposed it to like elementary schools. I don't know what grade, 3rd, 4th, 5th, or you just do it to the schools. But it's an opportunity for the kids to name a plow, and then we would then take the winners, or actually I think that we could have the citizens of the city kind of just vote. We'd put them out there and just do a survey, have some fun. But then we could then give them like a prize of like $100 to go towards school supplies, but then they get the honor of, and then the snow plow that they've named can go to the school, but it's also an opportunity to teach them safety and awareness also. So we could kind of couple that in with the kids and just have some fun with it. So it's just having the elementary schools name them, then we brand them and then take pictures of them with their plow and have some fun. But
I will tell you, I love the idea. There's a couple problems that because I processed this since you brought it up. There's a couple problems. Number one, we got to come up with where do we get the money to do that specific type of painting? Because on a snowplow, it's going to wear off. What would you say? Three, 4 runs? Yeah, and it's gone.
Doing on the doors?
Huh? Well, now we're talking about trucks, not plows.
Yeah.
Sir?
We're not wrapping.
we're not wrapping, it's like putting a name.
Airplanes put names
Right,
on.
you put the name on the plow and then you go plow snow and it's gone.
I wouldn't put it on the plow.
Does the Air Force when they name their pilot? Does it fly off?
Listen, if you if you name a snow plow and you put that name on the truck is also used for dump in the summertime. So you've got a snow name on a truck in the middle. I know. Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's the clarification, Mr. Mayor, that we need to be clear on, because indeed, if we actually name the blade, which is the plowing mechanism,
Right.
then you're right. We're gonna put, Mr. Speedy on the blade
Or Buzz Iceyear.
or Buzz Lightyear. Very clever. Virtually every other storm, we're gonna have to relabel and all that kind of thing.
Correct.
And I wouldn't recommend that.
Correct.
And so a way to do that a little more effectively would be putting the name on the truck itself, which pushes the blade.
On the
And the reality is there are times where we were switching out blades and those kinds of things on top of trucks. But you have to be willing to tolerate the notion that during the summer, we're gonna have Mr. Ice McQueen or whatever we called it.
Buzz Ice Clear.
Oh, thank you. Running around during the summer, hauling sand and dirt and doing all things that dump trucks do in the off season. So, hopefully we can have some grace with some of these things so that we can get through it without having it be an onerous burden year in, year out.
Sure.
I don't think it's a project killer that the summer trucks would have snowplow names on them. I think it's cool. I'm like, oh, there's Control Salt Delete doing a different job now. That's sweet. I really don't think that matters. I think we should put it on the truck, call it a day. I would also suggest that maybe we don't do all 13 every year. Maybe we put them on a rotation and do 3 or 4, because otherwise it gets cumbersome. Yeah, name a couple a year, put them on a rotation. Sounds fun.
And I would imagine a wrap, just a sticker isn't gonna be very expensive. We're probably looking at $10-20.
Your Honor, we did put in the memo, if we did it on the truck door next to the unit number, that for all 13 trucks, it would cost approximately $3,400 to put the names on all of them.
$50 a truck.
Yes.
Seriousness though too. So in addition to names, we should get on the bandwagon, because if you go to bobvila.com, they have the most 25 most hilarious names, which are pretty awesome. But a lot of the other states are doing it. So like Nevada, Chicago, they're all doing it, but they're taking it as Ohio. They're taking it like a step level further, because they are promoting the hard work with this naming of the plows. It promotes safety as far as stay away from plows, take that distance, but then it also is promoting the hard work of the snowplow operators and clearing the roads. So
Well, I like the idea of allowing the children to come up with the names though, but Steve, you're up. No.
there's so many different ideas on how to work it.
And I haven't looked at a plow up close, but I know the front top edge of the plow has the rubber there to keep it from flopping on out. I don't know for sure how that is attached, but can you take a piece of unequal legged angle iron, like a piece of 3x8, and put a piece of angle iron bolted right on where that's bolted, and then put your name with a wrap right across the top of that blade to where it won't rub off. It's on the blade and you don't have to worry about it being named during the summer.
That's
Just
It's a pretty big expense, but I'll tell you, I'm kind of keen to the idea of putting a name on the truck, and I'll tell you why, because it also gives us some accountability. You know, hey, Ice McQueen just dropped a rock off his truck and smashed my windshield, or, you know, whatever. So, I mean, that's not a bad idea. Hold on, Kyle. And then you.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I think it makes more sense to be on the truck. I copied Lisa's suggestion to bring this topic up because I saw that Gillette did it. That's cool that other states are doing it, but I know our city administrators worked in Gillette, and it sounds like they have at least one winner under their belts doing it. There was some news stories that's what I had seen, was just some news stories. It sounded like the public participation was really high. Kids were excited to see the trucks that they had helped name. I think our memo mentions the fact that our marketing department did a really good job highlighting the work of a lot of public service crews, but snowplows in particular. Even did some biographies on some folks, and I constantly monitor Facebook, and I know that was very successful. I saw a lot of community engagement with just some of those behind the scenes kind of bios on some of our snowplow drivers and other folks, and so I've seen the community get engaged in that regard, and so my guess is, like Gillette, we would have kids get really pumped about seeing the snowplows that they help name and stuff like that. So I think a quick call to Gillette just to see how their last winter went with the program, you know, makes sense, but it makes sense to put it on the trucks. And I agree with Councilor Pollack. I don't think it's a deal killer that a winter specific name is on the side of a truck when it's doing its summer duties.
Counselor?
So before she talks and before you call Snopa,
Let's leave it to the third graders to name them, okay?
What did you just say?
Extra trip. I just wanted to segue.
So what the city had done this last winter, which I think was phenomenal on our website, was they were like saying, hey, I don't know, Goodstein, Ice McQueen is heading your way, you know, kind of a thing. So, you know, it would be something that we could kind of follow. It was very helpful with all of that snow. And we were always wondering, when are this, you know, the streets getting it plowed? But when the city kept saying, you know, Hilltop, you're next, kind of a thing, that was cool. And then if they could just like say, you know, we've got the names. And so I think the city can have a lot more fun with this. And we don't like
City manager.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if council wouldn't be comfortable with, staff kind of taking over from here in terms of, it sounds like we got at least a tentative green light to move forward. It would be really, really tough to do all 13 every single year. Rather a tiered approach in terms of a number of plows a year, and then maybe the next number of plows to a different school and so on. If you don't mind us taking a little bit of latitude here, we'll go forward.
I think we have a great marketing department with Rachel and Christopher, and I think they can reach out to one school at a time and let each school name one or whatever. And Jolene and her staff, I think that's a fantastic idea. Would everybody be okay with that?
As long as we don't overthink it, like simplicity doesn't have to cost millions of dollars.
Well, I would tell you, I would like a report, Ms. Martinez, when you're done. I'd love to know what names we settled on and which ones got picked. And I think that'd be a fun thing to talk about at council, and maybe, you know, invite the classroom or the children that named them and bring them into chambers and
a whole deal about
yeah, but make a big deal out of it and let them get a little piece of government as well. I think this could turn into something really fun and really good for our community and our children. And for me, I would love it. So more kids in here, the better. So, all right, sounds like we have our direction there. So I'd like to thank you for all the information. No, very much. And Chad, thanks for being here. I know this is painstaking for you. And I think you're the first one Cindy's brought that actually had to get up and talk to us. So most of them usually just sit there. So yeah, thanks for participating. I appreciate you. All right, let's, and thank you, council. That's, this could turn out to be a lot of fun. So Lisa, great idea. Let's move on, sir, to agenda review, if we may.
Yes, sir. I can move through this pretty.
And we are, I'll tell you, we're way ahead of schedule. We're rocking tonight.
Okay, good deal.
Doing good.
And as it relates to the agenda review, counselors, if you don't mind referring to your great document. We have, a couple items I wanted to bring to your attention. The TNR and first reading, related to the TNR is subject for your review on the 5th of September, along with the bar and grill discussion as well. We also have the adoption potentially of the North Platte River Park Master Plan, which we certainly have had some discussion on since the last time we visited about this. We don't anticipate any changes pursuant to the public comments we've gotten thus far. Nonetheless, we will be wrapping that up by the end of this month and have it ready for the 5th. We also anticipate the sponsorship and naming rights discussion coming forward, that relationship with OVG on the 5th as well.
That's for where?
That would be, Mr. Mayor, it could be any number of facilities that that OVG and their team would want to participate in seeking naming opportunities for.
Okay.
So it could be the ice arena, it could be.
Because I noticed 2 lines under that, it also says sponsor or sponsorship and naming rights. So I didn't know if we were talking about 2 separate things or if that was just
No, that is indeed a duplicate entry. And we will fix that oversight.
No, and that's why I asked, because with the OVG, I was beginning to wonder if they were talking about renaming the Ford Center, and I thought we had that under contract.
So that's a
Okay.
totally different one that would come separate.
Good to know. Thank you.
And then if I could direct your attention to the work session on the 12th, you can see that we have the business plan discussion coming up for aquatics, some rate discussion for Hogadon, and then as a follow-up item for some of your requests, a discussion about business licenses. Beyond that, Mr. Mayor and councilors, I would direct your attention to the back page of the grid, wherein we have future agenda items listed. Please review and make sure we haven't missed items of interest for yourself. And also please be aware of what it is that staff is proposing on our near horizon for things we need your input on and direction for. That's all I have.
Okay, and keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we do not have a meeting next week. It will be the 5th Tuesday, so we will not have a meeting. So when we reconvene on September 5th, we will have already seen University of Wyoming take the field in their first game against Texas Tech on September 2nd in Laramie.
Big upset coming up.
Hang on. So, okay, and Councilor Polly.
Would it make sense to throw the naming city garbage trucks discussion into the existing framework rather than leaving it on the future agenda items?
I think we can,
just remove it because that's a staff deal now.
Well, we're talking about plows and we have garbage trucks on the agenda, so like should just treat that as one thing.
Yeah, can we not coordinate?
Rehash this out
And so we don't have to do that? Can we not lump that all into?
well, Mr. Mayor, let me ask you this. Would council be okay kind of running the plow truck item as sort of a pilot? See how it works, and then maybe we can consider garbage trucks and Eric's vehicle and so forth later.
Sure.
The city attorney, name city.
Trashy McTrashy truck.
There it is.
Oh, geez, I knew it. I knew she was gonna have something. I was trying to beat her to it. Okay.
The Lincoln lawyer.
Is there anything on legislative review, Mr. City Manager?
No.
Nothing there? All right, let's go with council around the table. You ready, Scoop? I'm not gonna start with you. Councilor Bond, I'll give you first go.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing this week. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Councilor Kathy.
CPU meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And then we have that special water board meeting on Thursday at 9.
Yes. Thank you for that. Yeah.
And I wanted to say the concert Friday night was not Friday night, hell, 5150 Festival Saturday was quite enjoyable. It looked like everybody was having a great time. I saw Councilor Gamroth there.
Oh, you'll go to somebody else's, huh?
I think for all of those that were there, they owe the True family a vote of thanks because the fireworks display at the end was put on and sponsored by the True family. They even had a special reception over at the M Saturday afternoon. They are celebrating their 75th year in business here in Casper. And so that's what all of that celebration was. And I think they've been very good for the community. And the community owes them a thanks for some of the things that they do that most of the community doesn't even realize they do. So
Thank you,
that's
sir.
about all I have.
All right. Counselor Haskins.
Well, I had an extremely crazy busy week last week for council and I didn't go to any of it. So for everyone who covered for me, I appreciate it. My granddaughter and I were enjoying the hospitality of Wyoming Medical Center banner. She is on the mend doing well. So for everyone who asked, thank you. Friday, Casper Ford Wyoming Center, Lindsay Sterling. And then I'm not going to ruin her thing, but my daughter will be opening with Kelly Walsh's marching band for Amber.
Oh, thanks for that reminder.
Go for it. Tell us all about it.
Counselor Pollock.
Thank you. Well, before I get to that exciting news, I have a slate of meetings that I attended to bring you all up to speed on. Had the Metro Animal Task Force meeting, really with that group. Here with our council, we've been working through the TNR ordinance process and also the fee adjustment and rate adjustments for Metro. Our partner entities are doing the same. So we got an update from Mills that they are somewhere along that process with both of those items as well. Working to check in with Bar None and Evansville to see where they're at with their respective councils. But that, the progress of that group continues to go well. We continue to make small steps. Next on the docket will be to start addressing some of the larger issues that I think that group needs to attend to, being, the building itself, how we structure the oversight of that entity and a variety of things that we're working with Mills and Evansville and Bar None in the county to address. So work continues to go on there, but we have seen some progress in each of the respective jurisdictions to start updating their ordinances. So that's great. Had an MPO policy committee meeting as well. We reviewed all of the current projects that MPO is working on, including ours, which was the study for the North Platte subdivision, and that took up a bit of the time, as well as updates from YDOT. Always great to hear from those folks about what they've got, what they're working on. So that we mostly talk about Poplar Street Bridge with them, and they're putting that back out for reconsideration, hoping that we can secure a successful bid for that project. Had the LGBTQ Advisory Council meeting on Friday. Really, the big news there is that we have some terms that have come up for board seats there, for positions there. So I believe that applications are open now for any folks who'd like to volunteer their time towards that effort. We'll be accepting applications, and you can find those on the website.
And you have two positions.
Two seats, yeah. And that's all for my meetings last week. And yes, Wyoming Symphony Orchestra has their Pops in the Park performance this Saturday at Washington Park. And through a community-wide fundraising effort, I was able to secure my spot on the podium, and we'll be conducting two pieces for them on Saturday. Well, I don't know if it's before or after PBD. John Curlin and the High Plains Drifters join them on the stage to perform the rest of their Pops concert. So I'm really looking forward to that. It starts at 7:30 is when their performance starts. I believe 6:30 is when Kelly Walsh takes the stage, or maybe 6, and the park opens at 5:30. So grab your tickets. They do have a family deal $50 gets you in for 2 adults, 3 children between the ages of 10 and 18, and all kids under 10 free. So you can snag a full family pass and bring chairs and blankets and make a night of it. It should be really a great show, if I do say so myself.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna miss it. Counselor Ingebretson.
A little bit about 5150. It was a huge success. However, I have had so many phone calls complaining about the fireworks. And then, so I went through the advertisement and stuff, and at no point did they ever advertise that there were going to be fireworks. There have not been fireworks before. And so, I had veterans and people with dogs and all kinds of things going on. So it's just, I guess it's just recommended that the DDA would maybe just advertise it a little bit better, saying that there's gonna be fireworks so that people can be better prepared. It just caught everybody a little bit off guard. I'm not saying that it was a bad thing. It just caught everybody off guard. I attended a contractor board meeting last week. We had 3 new builds issued in July, which brings the total new builds for residential homes in Casper up to 16. And just for reference, in a normal year, when the market is really good, we would hit 16 by February. So
Wow.
that kind of tells you a little bit about our market. And then also the one thing that I did want to just hit on, that our market is definitely changing. And so we have about 178 homes currently on the market active. And so we have not had that number since 2018.
That high of a number, you mean, or? Okay.
That many homes. So our market is definitely doing the shift.
Good to know. Anything else? All right, well, thank you. Counselor Buzz McLightyear.
Hey, yeah.
Counselor Scoop, there it is.
Scoop, there it is. And before I go home and watch The Blizzard of Oz.
You need to chill out, really.
Show her this website, like I said, I've created a monster.
I'm leaving.
I love it, man. I love
That's enough.
it.
I just want to, I didn't really have any meetings or that much outside of my normal job, this week. So that was really slow. So that was nice for me. But this weekend coming up, besides things that are happening locally, we also have the Sheep Herders Festival that's happening in Glen Rock. So it's always fun to go watch that and take part and, watch those sheepdogs herd. That's one of the best and funnest events. But free, fun, family fun. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Counselor Gamroth?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Councilor Crawley, for the update on the Animal Shelter Task Force meeting. The only other thing I would add is that Scott Shell, who is doing a great job, I feel like, over there. He joined the Casper Community TNR group and watched them and how they, do one of their trap, spay, neuter events. And so I hope those groups are happy with the engagement from the animal shelter side of things. I also know Scott's looking for grants. There's some equipment, some of it semi-expensive that we would need to do these trap, spay, neuter events. And so I know he's actively seeking grants so that it would be at no cost to the city to, hold one of these events. Noted about the fireworks at DDA. I haven't got any of those phone calls or messages myself. But I'll certainly bring that up at our next meeting. I do think it was a surprise. I know Kevin mentioned earlier in the event that, there's a special surprise at the end of the event. So I think it was kind of one of those, keeping it secret and hoping people enjoy it. But noted, I'll bring those concerns to the next meeting. And then the only other thing I had was a Casper Housing Authority meeting last Thursday. My understanding was that the asbestos, is it a survey or a remediation plan, creation of a remediation plan? My understanding was that was supposed to happen Monday. So I think that was kind of the last hang up before they could actually start doing work at the Willard School location. And so I hope that remained on schedule and good. Liz is nodding her head and saying yes. So hopefully Housing Authority will be able to start actually putting shovels to the ground and start getting some things done over at the Willard School location. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You are welcome. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I don't have too much. I'll let the mayor talk more about it. We had our mayor and commissioner meeting last Thursday. I thought it was a good conversation around the 5th cent. Good candid conversation around, where the other municipalities are standing and what they're doing. And so, good conversation. And so I'll let the mayor maybe expand a little bit on that, but it was good to have that. So
It was. Thank you for that lead in. You went first, but thank you. Man, you do need to chill. Ice queen. So at our Natrona County government breakfast that we had, it sounds like some of the other communities are actually rethinking this. I think they're starting to understand kind of where our ideology was behind it. This isn't about taxing people. It's about just keeping something in place that's been there for 50 years. And Councilor Gamera said it so eloquently at that night we passed it that third reading. Since 1974, we've not gone to our constituency and asked them for any extra money. And we've built parks and roads, and I mean, and water and sewer bills are bought down, and there's so many great things that come from that. And in 50 years, we've never asked for another dime, and we're still not asking for another dime. We're just asking for the same penny. And it's, I think the other communities are starting to figure this out and understand how vitally important it is for our way of life, in order for us to take care of ourselves. So with that said, we'll see how that comes out. I know a couple of the other communities have already pushed it through. We were the first. There's been 2 others, so we'll see what happens with it. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that those leaders, those representatives of their republics, do what we feel is the right thing. God, if I went through all the meetings I've been through in the last 2 weeks, I'd be here for an hour. So I'm not going to bore you with that. I will tell you, I swore in 2 new officers last week. And so we have 2 brand new folks on their way to the academy. And I think we're still short, probably in that 15 to 18 range. So I know if there are any viable applicants that want to work for an award-winning, literally a nationally award-winning police department, please apply to our department, because we could use some good men and women, certainly. There is a retirement for Sergeant Jack Winter that will take place tomorrow at the PD. And so unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to another great officer, and then hope we could find a replacement for him as well. So, but we've also had, I just went to a promotion ceremony last week and got to watch 5 promotions within our department, which is, to me, the best thing you could see happen in your department when you have people that you feel are good enough and qualified enough to lead your department into the future, to give them that accolade. That's just such a great thing for the department and for the city of Casper. Let's see, Joint Powers Board meeting Tuesday or Thursday, tomorrow. Thursday morning. And tomorrow, believe it or not, I'm going to make a trek to Lander to go sit in the courtroom. My little girl that I adopted 12 years ago from Russia, somehow the adoption got screwed up and Russia recognizes it, but the US doesn't. So we literally have to go back through the proceeding to make it official. And she's like, but I'm your daughter. I'm like, yes, you are. Nothing changes. We're just going to make it official. So that'll be a fun, exciting time for me and my family. Don't forget, school's back. I believe they start tomorrow.
28.
Monday.
Okay. My daughter goes back tomorrow in the Lander School District. So start being aware, school zones, paying attention to lots of kids in the crosswalks. It's that time of year, early mornings, late afternoons. The sun can be a booger in some intersections, and we just really need to be mindful of the kiddos, because they're going to be back. They're going to be back naming snowplows soon enough. And I think that's all I have. Great discussion tonight. Lots of good information. I look forward to Thursday night and talking to the Public Service Commission. I know Mayor Juarez from Mills will be there speaking on behalf of her constituents as well. So, we got to keep fighting for our people. That's what we do. So good work. No meeting next week. So we'll see you September 5th for our next regularly scheduled city council meeting. And at that time, we'll have a report on the University of Wyoming and see how they look against Texas Tech. Vice Mayor, the Bull Riders predicting an upset.
Big upset.
So I'll be in Laramie right there in Tailgate Alley to see
By
it.
3.
By 3?
That's all I have.
That is a huge prediction because there is no greater Wyoming Cowboy fan than me. And I think I'm taking Texas Tech in 21. So
Wyoming by 3.
I hope you're right. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bruce,
Sure.
I think the retirement was tomorrow. It's Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah, it's Thursday. Sorry. You are correct. You are correct.
Well, when you said tomorrow, I looked
No,
it
my
up.
Thursday is, I have 9 o'clock there. I have a 10:30 interview.
It's 9